acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. So I remind the gallery that Council's meeting local law requires that members of the gallery must not interject or take part in Council debate. Any person who is called to order may be requested to leave the Council chamber. Notwithstanding this, I am entitled to ask you, and I will ask you, to make a contribution to this meeting. There's two opportunities. One is that you may ask a question in one of the early agenda items, or you may speak to any item of business that we get to during the meeting, and that's not limited to asking a question, but you can make a point. If you have registered to speak online, you must let a staff member know that you've arrived. I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to a couple of minutes and to avoid repeating any points that have already been made by other speakers, even if you really agree with them. Please note that all council meetings are now live streamed to allow the community to watch and listen. In accordance with council's local law, this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped without my permission. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the emergency warden, who is tonight? Chantel. So, apologies. We have one apology.
Happy to move that. That's Councillor Brandt. He sends his apology. He's attending a funeral interstate this evening.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl, and second to Councillor Simic. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Minutes of the previous meetings, agenda item 2. Councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 18 September 2019 have been circulated. Are there any questions? You're moving it? Moved Councillor Voss, seconded by Councillor Bond. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest? There being none, we'll move on to the next, which is a presentation of award. This is always very exciting. Now, the presentation of award has, following the process of the meeting's procedure local law, been added to tonight's agenda, and I'll ask the CEO to advise.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor, the City of Port Phillip and the Albert Park Kindergarten have received a Community Engagement Achievement Award from the City's Power Partnership. The City's Power Partnership Awards recognise the work of climate heroes in local governments across the country who are transforming Australia's energy landscape, and I'd ask Ms Lily Rosic, General Manager, City Strategy and Sustainable Design, to say a few words and present the award to you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr CEO.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the two council staff, Brett Hedger, Greenhouse Programs Officer, and Verity McLucas, Sustainability Education Officer, worked with the Albert Park Kindergarten through our Seedlings program, which is part of a suite of community education programs delivered by Council under the Sustainability City Community Action Plan. This was an innovative partnership program between the kindergarten and council, which has resulted in the credible achievement of certifying the kindergarten as the first certified carbon-neutral early childhood education and care service in Australia. The sustainability initiatives delivered at the kindergarten have resulted in a reduction of gas usage by 100%, electricity by 59%, water by 71% and waste by over 50%. These fantastic figures are also supported by high-quality education programs for children that I've been advised have also been recognised with an excellent rating from the National Quality Authority, Australian Quality Authority. I am proud to present this award to Council with Mark Cassinet, the Manager of Environmental Sustainability, which was announced in a ceremony in Sydney and sent to us for formal presentation this evening.
Right, I get to stand up and receive it. I'll go this way. So after that particularly cheesy moment, I will sit here with this placed there. Let's assume it doesn't fall over. Agenda item 4, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have 4 petitions on tonight's agenda. And councillors, we've received a... we've received... No speakers for the 4.1, petition 4.1. Councillors, are there any questions? If there are no questions, can I have a motion? Move Councillor Bond, that's the officer's rec, and seconded by Councillor Voss. Are there any speakers? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Petition closure of Esplanade West, Dow Street, Port Melbourne. We have one speaker, Nathan Cooperholtz. Mr. Cooperholtz, can I ask you to sit just there and turn on the mic and read into the record your name and suburb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillors. My name is Nathan Cooperholtz. I'm a resident with my wife, Josephine Cooperholtz, who's present here this evening at 217 Esplanade West, Port Melbourne. We've been there for about 5 years. Before that, we were within the municipality, but somewhere else. Since we've moved in there about 5 years ago, we've noticed an ever-increasing number of vehicles speeding through Esplanade West, then coming to a sudden halt at the speed hump where Esplanade West meets Dow Street, and I'm assuming all the councillors know what we're talking about. And of course, this, coupled with the ever-increasing number of children visiting the excellent amenities that the council has provided in Edwards Park, coupled with the children going to and from the childcare centre, prompted us, together with our various neighbours who together have signed the petition, to believe that there really is an urgent need and indeed great advantage in working towards the closure of Esplanade West where it meets Dow Street, where that speed hump is. It would achieve a number of things. First, the avoidance. I'm not suggesting, and I noticed from the council officials' report that they're concerned about and wish to investigate the accident level to date. Our position isn't that there have been many accidents, because we're not aware of that, but we are very concerned to ensure some genuine and adequate prevention of an accident, because it goes without saying if heaven forbid, a child was injured or worse in an accident because of the speeding cars through there, it would be disastrous for all concerned and everlasting in terms of its impact. There is adequate alternative access. Indeed, the road is used only by people who wish to avoid using Lion Street. There's another controversy which I've identified in the petition we've all signed, and that is that the Public Transport Victoria bus uses Esplanade West, but only in one direction, in a very convoluted fashion. It does a dog-leg right-hand turn from Liardet Street. It navigates the speed hump. It then stops at the end of Esplanade West where it meets Lion Street. It then swings right into Lion Street. It then stops again and swings left into Bridge Street. That is the official route. For as long as we can recall, until very recently, the bus in fact went up Lion Street, and we can see no reason, being the much bigger street and the much straighter street and the much wider street, why that shouldn't be the preferred and indeed directed alternative, particularly if the road closure came to an existence. Further point I'd like to raise is that I understand, and I don't have any technical basis for suggesting this, that there is a view within the council which we as ratepayers, technically my wife's the ratepayer, but which we as ratepayers endorse, and that is to see the reclamation of land and streets for park area, and that, whilst obviously there'd be some there'd be some detailed configuration that have to be undertaken. We do see the advantage of this closure also facilitating the possible expansion of the park into Dow Street. There is a very good example, I'm not sure of the exact name of the street, but behind the special purpose school at the end of Liardet Street, there's been a reclamation done there. So, in a word, or a few more words, thank you for the opportunity of being able to present this petition. We commend it to you, sir, and to your councillors. We're sure that it will be considered favourably, and we trust that we will be given an opportunity to add anything further either tonight or otherwise if that's required. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Cooper-Holt. So we have a question from Councillor Simic of the officers. Thanks very much. That'll be all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mayor. I note the officers' recommendation and I wonder whether officers can elaborate on whether any reviews have been done to date to look at some of the safety concerns which have been identified in the petition, and in fact if those safety concerns are also concerns that Council's possibly already looking at.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we received the petition only 2 weeks ago, and school holidays started about 2 weeks ago. We were not in position to conduct any investigations as yet.
I'm Mayor, just wondering historically whether we've looked at that area and whether there's pre-existing safety concerns that Council's been aware of regarding that area.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, speed hump is in the street, which indicates that some traffic management treatments have been done previously. I am not aware of any safety concerns. As I said, this petition came to us only 2 weeks ago and we have not been able to do any investigations as yet.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you. I note that the officer's recommendation only concentrates on traffic and it doesn't actually take into account Mr Cooper-Holtz's request about potentially using part of the street for a park and to improve the park amenity. Just wondering, is that something that we should be adding to the officer's recommendation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my experience is that everyone would love to live in a cul-de-sac. So we need to conduct proper investigations first before we start considering whether the road can be closed and converted into some sort of parkland.
So if there are no further questions, do we have the officer's recommendation is pretty just let's accept it. Do we have a mover?
Excuse me, Mayor, can we just have the...
Yes,
She's good though. She's good. Thanks, Chantal. Councillor Voss?
Thank you. I'd like to move an amendment to
Sure.
the amended resolution.
An alt motion.
Alternative motion.
Sure.
And add to number 4. Takes into account the aspirations of the residents, to close the street at the speed hump, retain parking and improve park amenity.
So you're moving that?
That's what I'm moving.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconder, Councillor Simic. Do you wish to speak to that?
Can I add something to the end of that?
Of course.
I haven't had any advice, so so parking and improved parking and address these concerns in the report. Which I think it does anyway.
That's fine, I think. Okay. So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Voss?
Just briefly, I have met with many of the residents in Esplanade West / Dow Street, because it changes at the speed hump, the name of the street, and they do have strong aspirations to make the street safer. So I'm moving this additional item on the recommendation because I believe that is part of the intention of this petition. I also know many parents in the community, and particularly when my child was small, that the playground is located very close to Dow Street, Esplanade West, there right at the speed hump. And if you have a child that likes to run away, it's very, very close. And people have always said there should be a fence there, there should be a fence there. And I know council has always said no fences, but it has alarmed people. And so this might be another way, you know, to have your child safely around that playground near the road, but not necessarily having buses and heavy vehicles running down that street. So, councillors, I commend the motion to you, and look forward to seeing the report come back to council.
Councillor Simic?
I'm glad that we were able to amend the recommendation and incorporate what I believe and agree is the full intent of the petition in the review that officers will take. And as Councillor Voss said, I look forward to this coming back to council so we can discuss this matter further.
Any other councillors? So there's no need to close. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. 4.3, a petition, removal of ban on use of speakers by buskers. We have one speaker from the community. Jacob Hapeta. Ironically, you have to turn your mic on.
Very ironic. Yes, my name is Jacob Harpenter. I'm here to speak on behalf of the petitioners on the petition. I don't know when it was that the council came up with these bylaws on the busking, although I have been busking in Port Phillip for over 25 years. So I had no idea that there was permits that were required, and also that it cost $66 to obtain a busking permit. That Melbourne has a strong history of busking, and buskers contribute to the character and culture of Melbourne. This is according to the City of Melbourne. Melbourne is internationally recognised as a city that supports music and busking makes an important contribution to the cultural life within the City of Melbourne. Port Phillip, in its busking guidelines, states that busking is a popular occurrence in many Port Phillip tourist areas. Specifically, what the petition is about is the first stipulation by council that the use of mains or battery-powered electrical amplifiers is strictly prohibited. Where I have a problem is that while Melbourne Council allows amplification, and for specific reasons which I will state. Amplification is permitted while busking in the city in order to balance the needs of the performer to be clearly heard against the reasonable amenity expectations of passers-by or people living or working in proximity. Amplification enables performers to, 1, save their voices from strain and damage. So for me, it's a health and safety issue on that basis alone. Amplify quieter instruments that are not easy to hear above ambient sound levels. Now, I specifically sing and play guitar. Neither of those instruments are loud enough to be heard to practice the art that I actually practice, that I actually learn. And also to supply a backing track which provides rhythmic assistance, musical accompaniment or musical backing for street theatre performances. Again, the City of Melbourne limits have been set so that the sound level of busking is slightly greater than general ambient noises and loud enough to be clearly heard above background noise. So, under their guidelines, they have a couple of guidelines, one for the Burke Street Mall and one for the general area, but they've set a sound level of 81 decibels from 1 metre away from the speaker. Then 3 metres away from the speaker is 72 decibels, and 6 metres away from it is 66 decibels. This is gives you a sphere of influence that's about as large as this room, which, using a smartphone, which all buskers use now in the city, you have a loudness meter in your smartphone. Before you start, you set your sounds, you set your levels, you know exactly how loud you are, so that you're not being a public nuisance. And because that defeats the purpose. You don't want to be sitting there being so loud that people can't come up to you and engage with you, which is part of the whole thing of busking. So we'd like that particular blanket ban on amplification to be repealed.
Thanks very much, Jacob. Oh, we've got a question. Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Just tell us how you power your amplifiers on the street. So there's no cords or obstruction for pedestrian safety or anything of the sort?
Again, in the City of Melbourne, now I believe they have, particularly for the mall, you have to audition for the actual mall. But in general areas, they have a induction intake, if you like, so where you've got to go and attend, and then they run you through your health and safety so that you're not tripping up people, you're not sitting in doorways, you're not sitting up against walls and blocking, particularly like blind people coming down the street and using the sides of buildings as taps, and all of those sorts of issues, so that all buskers pretty much know that anyway.
And the location you sit in, which is pretty constant in terms of where you sit on Mbase Street, does the noise...
On Mbase Street it is, yes. I usually go there on a...
Yeah, but does the noise travel across the road given the environmental conditions on that street? Like in your experience?
Well, where I'm doing it is right at the lights, so there's a lot of traffic noise right at those lights, because traffic pulling up and starting up.
And how's your relationship with the local traders in that area?
Very good, I believe. Well, I've been doing it there for over 10 years in that particular spot, so they've got used to me. They like me, I think. So, yeah, it's been very good.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Mr. Harputa-Petter?
Yes.
Do you use your smartphone to measure
Yes, I do.
how loud it is on Mbase Street?
Now that I've found out about it, I have it on my phone and so I use it.
Yep.
So for the last 6 months since I found that out,
Yeah.
it's constant. I've got it down. I know what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jacob. I think there's going to be a motion to basically accept the petition, and stuff will happen after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
But thanks very much. So
So
it's been moved by Councillor Pearl, seconded by Councillor Simic. Do you wish to speak? Sorry? Does anyone else wish to speak?
I would like to thank Mr. Hapeta. Is that right? Thank you for coming and presenting and acknowledging that you're not submitting this on your own behalf, but you're looking at the broader policy considerations that Council has to look at. Yes. And I urge all councillors to, as a result, make sure that we look at this issue as a council-wide issue and ensure that we don't look at a specific instance of where amplified noise has been used. I look forward to officers reviewing this. I know that officers have looked at this in the past, and as a result, the policy exists the way it's written because of historical approaches that Council has taken to this issue. But it's good for us to look at things when we know that they have a certain impact on members of our community, and I look forward to the outcome of this investigation. So thank you.
Councillor Voss?
I'd also like to thank Mr. Harpeta for bringing this petition in. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really pleased that we're having the opportunity to consider this and potentially debate whatever the decision is a bit later on. I think your music really adds, in particular, to Bay Street and the creativity in our city. I know it's a part of shopping that I personally have enjoyed listening to your music, and at times it does get quite loud, and for some people I think that's the problem. But I think I'm very keen to investigate this. Having the opportunity to use amplified music and then have limits on it so it's appropriate means that a lot more people can be heard, but it can be managed in a way. So I think this is a really sensible thing for our officers to have a look at and make some recommendations to us that hopefully will mean that we get to listen to more of your music. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Oh, we haven't finished yet, Jacob. We've just got to have a vote.
Like Councillor Voss, I like listening to your music. I don't like it when I'm campaigning out the front of Bay Street Coles and you start singing unflattering songs about me, though.
Who would do that?
And I'd ask you to refrain from that in the future. But you are probably very accurate as well. But people like you are the glue that binds our community together, particularly those trading strips. And what we have to do as a council is balance a few things up in terms of the concerns of some of the community and make sure they're dealt with. But I'm sure once the report comes back, and I hope you do come back, Jacob, and visit us again to ensure that we get this balance right and we can continue your good work on this street because we highly, highly value it, and I'm sure the traders and the local residents on that street do also. So let us go away, do a bit of work, but I can't thank you enough for putting this forward, and I can't thank you enough for coming here this evening. This is the core work of council, and you're making your city a better place by the actions you've taken this evening and before today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll just go to the vote now. All those in favour? So that's unanimous. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
Okay, 4.4, it's a petition requesting a Spencer P. Jones Lane in St Kilda. We have two members of the community. Michelle Nichol? She's here, she is here.
That's true. Hi, and thank you very much for hearing this tonight. Hello, Councillor, Mayor and Councillors. So, could I
ask you to read your name and suburb into the record first, please, Mish?
Could you speak up, Dick? It's actually really hard to hear anything in this room.
Can I ask you to read your name and suburb into
Michelle
the record?
Nichols, St Kilda.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so You will have seen that there's been a petition that has garnered over 1,000 signatures in support of naming an unnamed lane between Fitzroy Street and Jackson Street in St Kilda, affectionately known as Piss Alley, renaming it to Spencer P. Jones Lane in St Kilda. My understanding is that your officers have seen a submission that outlines the work of Spencer P. Jones, a local musician who's recently died, who has a vast body of work, and there is a great deal of documentation around that, so I won't bother boring you more with that. Spencer made undoubtedly an invaluable contribution to music in this state, indeed in Australia, and has an international reputation. However, notwithstanding that, I think the naming of a lane after a musician in this location between the Prince of Wales, an iconic music venue, and the George, also an iconic music venue, makes sense in terms of council's placemaking, cultural heritage, arts and culture, tourism, visitation, and many other aspirations that we have for our fine city. That lane is unnamed. I'm not aware of any competing ideas for that lane to be named. I don't know of anybody else who's put in the work to do that. And, you know, there's undoubtedly a great deal of support for this within the music community, both here and around Australia. So I believe that officers have recommended that Council consider this favourably and move to next steps to contact the Office of Geographic Locations, and I'm here to entreat you to do that if you see fit. Thank you.
Thanks, Reba. Barry Williams.
So that's on now. Barry Williams, St Kilda West. Good evening. I'm a former board member of Music Victoria. I served on it for 5 years in the role as treasurer. I'm present here tonight to support the proposal for the lane in St Kilda to be named after the late Spencer P. Jones. I need not go into Spencer's history around St Kilda music community, as I'm sure the worthiness was covered in the submission to the council. I've been very fortunate in the last 20 years to have travelled to some of the great music cities of the world, and they are all unique in how they preserve the culture of their past and current musicians. But in my experience, no city presents and preserves its musical culture like Melbourne. By naming a lane in St Kilda after Spencer, we will be adding to this rich history of the music that the community of St Kilda has so richly enjoyed over the past 60 years. Spencer is so synonymous with so many bands that grace the stages of so many of St Kilda's venues, it would be only fitting to remember his legacy by naming the proposed lane Spencer P. Jones. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillors, any questions? Councillors, we have a motion moved by Councillor Copsey, seconded by Councillor Bond. Do you wish to speak to it? Councillor Bond?
Yes, I will speak. For as long as I've lived in St Kilda, this lane has been known by another name, which I won't mention. I think Miss Nicol actually raised it, but I think it would be great to remove that name and give this name this laneway a proper name. With regard to the artist, I've never heard of this person, but that doesn't mean they haven't made a great contribution to St Kilda. I listen to 3AW, not music, so that's no surprise there that I've never heard of them. But, you know, all in favour of naming this and recognising someone who's of significance to St Kilda and actually giving this laneway a formal lane so it can, we can reduce the use of it by its informal name. Thank you.
Any further? Do you wish to close, Councillor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Copsey? No, Councillor Crawford, sorry.
Excuse my very croaky voice, everyone. I just wanted to thank very much Barry and Michelle and Nick Haynes, who've been doing a lot of work around this over quite a period of time. And I think it's very heartening that our community is so engaged with keeping this area interesting and great and creative. So thank you.
Yep, thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this. I know it's an idea that's had a long gestation, and so very, very pleased to see the effort of the community coming to this point. I'm very happy to endorse the recommendation that we apply to the Registrar of Geographic Names for an exemption, which would be required in order to affix this name. Thank you once again to the community members who've worked very passionately, I know, for a long time to bring the petition to this point. It's great.
Thanks very much. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Agenda item 5, sealing schedule. Councillors, we have no documents that require sealing. Now we go to public question time, agenda item 6. And we have no questions from the general questions from the community. We do. Can't see them on my list. Here we are, public question time. Sorry, Tim Ryan.
It's already on. And I bought my own chair. So my name's Tim Ryan. I'm the CEO of Lord Somers Camp and Powerhouse, located in the Powerhouse building in Albert Park Lake, or on Albert Park Lake. I wanted to, first of all, take my short allotted time to thank a number of people in this room who've already spent some time counselling us through on a major milestone within the City of Port Phillip. Powerhouse has been a community empowerment not-for-profit that's sustained by its own social enterprise, its focus which is running programs and activities that break down barriers, enhance diversity and build tolerance within the community. We've been doing that since 1929. With a major new powerhouse building located on Albert Park Lake gathering momentum that can further expand its community service and social enterprise, how would Council see the project best utilised for its local residents and at-need communities?
Thanks, Tim. That's your question. Can we take that on notice and get back to you, because it's quite a complicated question?
Most definitely.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim.
We'll probably ring you up and ask you what to say. Thanks very much for coming.
Pleasure.
Okay, so that's public question time, agenda item 6. Agenda item 7, councillor question time. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? If there are no questions, we'll move to the presentation of reports, agenda items 8 to 14. I'm going to, with your indulgence, bring forward 14.2, the South Melbourne Market Annual Report. The chairperson of the South Melbourne Market Committee is in attendance to present the 2018-19 South Melbourne Market Annual Report, and I'll bring this report to the front for the first item of consideration. So, thanks very much for coming. Could I ask you to read your name and suburb into the record?
Joanne Plummer. I'll go with South Melbourne. I've got 2, so...
You've got 2 suburbs?
I do.
So can I ask if you could speak to the report for us?
Yeah, so we'll take it as read. And really, I guess this is a report that is based on the previous committee's year, which was, a solid year, and really open it for questions, if that's appropriate.
Okay, yes, that's fine. I'm going to ask a question. Is the South Melbourne market a sort of place that you see as something that's capable of reform in the immediate future, or do we just keep it as it is?
Reform.
Change.
I think that is not necessarily that there's lots of opportunity. It probably doesn't matter so much what I think. What will be important is what the community thinks, and the options that we put together and then bring to the council at a point in time next year, this time next year, I guess. But we'll be working hard to make sure that there are a number of different visions put forward, and see what the very best public value is likely to be, and then bring that forward. But yeah, there is lots of opportunity.
Councillor Crawford, thanks very much.
Joe, I was wondering, for the people playing along at home, who would you be able to just highlight some of the amazing sustainability practices that our South Melbourne market is leading the way on? There's just so many innovative things happening there. It'd be great if you could just mention a couple of them.
So I think, can I just borrow that for a sec? Thank you. So there's lots of things that are being done at the moment. Probably one of the newer ones is the milk carton recycling, which is going gangbusters. They're always looking at new things like the seashells. Of course, we've got the solar power that's now being completed on the roofs and so forth, so that's another really good one. We're currently looking at food waste. We've banned plastic bags. We were the first to do that. I know that we're looking at straws and plastic cutlery and all those sorts of things as well. But there's certainly an opportunity to deepen those sustainability initiatives and broaden them out into the community as well.
Councillor Simic?
I can see one of the highlights in the 2018-19 annual report is that around 5.5 million visitors visited the South Melbourne market in that financial year. How are those visitor numbers measured? Would you be able to expand on that a little bit? That's a fantastic result.
Yes, we have a particular term for that. What's the visiting? Traffic counters. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's a little bit rudimentary in that way. So it's not like people are actually lasered as they walk in and out. So it's done at specific points in time, and it's used through traffic counters, and then obviously that number is leveraged.
Councillor Voss?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge there is some new members of the committee, in particular you, Joe, as the chair, but also there's 2 other independents. I'm just wondering if you can give like a one-sentence introduction and their skills to those new members, please.
Yeah, I certainly can. So we have Simon Talbot, who currently is not here today, but he is the CEO of Parks Victoria and has got lots of experience in, all sorts of things, but in particular food, community, social and environmental, as well as governance. We have Andrew sitting here with us, Andrew Danson, who's got, again, lots of experience in food, retail, leasing, property, marketing and the like. And I have a corporate retail background along with community governance, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, this is a diversion from usual practice. We also have to ask questions of the officers. So, councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Pearl?
Yeah, just waiting for the call on me. I'm just wondering if if officers could give a breakdown of further details on the professional services line on page 33. There was an increase in professional services from 195,000 in financial year 17-18 to 842,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. That's maybe too loud now. The professional services line in the South Melbourne market budget for 18-19 was comprised of the following items. So just short of $365,000 for building compliance assessment work that was undertaken, just shy of $80,000 worth of spending on strategic business case and the consultancy work that went into that, about $170,000 for a traffic study to look at the flow of traffic in and around the market, $35,000 worth of legal fees, $31,000 of professional service, and then an other bucket of $160 thousand. The major variances in the professional services and consultants other is employment of the or the employment arrangement of the interim manager, as well as the payments to the independent members. But the largest variance between the 17-18 and 18-19 figures is the inclusion of the three large projects that I mentioned first up.
Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much. The budget is the report indicates a loss of $516,000 for the 18-19 financial year. Only 4 years ago, the market was making a surplus of $1 million. Could you please give some background as to why the market has lost over $500,000 this year, whether or not that loss was budgeted at the beginning of the financial year, and whether or not there is a budgeted profit for next financial year?
Good question.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd need to take that question on notice.
Sorry. I'm happy to, if there are other people who are...
It's because the $1 million surplus was because we were using a strict cash accounting system. We moved across to an accrual system which now includes depreciation, head office expenses and a number of other items that weren't included in that surplus from 4 years ago when we were strictly using cash accounting for the market.
Is that right? Well, we're only using cash. Okay.
But depreciation isn't included in that operating result as a total expense.
Okay. Well, we shouldn't be debating it. Yeah. We'll take it on notice. But thanks very much for that addition, Councillor Bond. Any further questions, Councillor Pearl?
I'm good.
You're good? Councillor Voss? Councillor Pearl, do you wish to move?
I'll move, yep.
Seconded by Councillor Voss. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Then I'll speak next. Just wanted to say what a beautifully presented annual report. It really is a feast for the eyes. Such amazing photographs that really capture, I think, the spirit of the market. So it's full of terrific information. I think much of the report is really about the sustainability initiatives, and they are really incredible. And as you pointed out, the milk bottle collection process is going really well. I dropped mine off on the York Street bin, and there unfortunately is often other things in it, but I'm sure people will come around to understanding what that is all about. Just wanted to thank the Section 86 committee in the last committee, and also welcome the new committee. And I wanted to thank the market team for doing such a great job at the market, day in, day out. I also wanted to do a special call out to Mark Edmonds. Mark has been the interim manager there for some time now. He has been an incredible resource, and just want to thank him for his service there. Mark is, well, it was an interim position, and we have a new person that's going to be stepping in as a permanent. There's been some great things in this report. It talks about the asset improvements, the increase in the stalls, the Wi-Fi, the heating, the umbrellas, the improvement in the lighting, market research. The marketing reach has continued to impress with its engagement. The events and the experiences continue to improve, but there's always room for improvement, as we've just heard. And I'm certainly very happy to be on that committee and continue the strategic direction going forward of our beloved market. So I'm commending the annual report to you all.
Councillor Simic.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I spent 2 years on the South Melbourne Market Management Committee, and this is the first year I haven't been on, but I can see that the market just keeps going from strength to strength. The sustainability measures, which we've already talked about, which really set the market as a leader in the industry and across Victoria. something that I know as a councillor I'm very proud of, but so many people in our community are equally proud of that as well. I wanted to highlight that behind the scenes there have been obviously quite a few governance changes, and we've had different market managers who've been acting and working during this period, and all of those approaches seem to have positively benefited the market, and there seems to be a really good structure and trajectory for the market going forward as well. So I think as councillors it's right for us to feel like the market's in very good hands with the people currently serving on the Market Management Committee. And I also I really want to commend them on the time they've taken to make sure that they're consulting with other councillors, the traders who are really so integral to the success of the market, but also in the conversations I've had with members of the committee, prioritising engagement with our community, because our community really sees the market as theirs, and rightly so, because it's had such a long history in South Melbourne, and we have to preserve that. So just really thank you for the work you're doing, and this report really highlights the improvements and the positive trajectory for the market.
Firstly, councillors, I want to thank you for entrusting me to put me on this committee. It's one of the best jobs, if not the best job I have representing council, and I thank you for entrusting me to be your representative, one of your representatives on that committee. I'm hugely grateful, and I take it as a big privilege. Everyone's gone through a number of the great things that have happened in the market in the last year. The other good thing was the renovation of the food hall, and that food hall hasn't seen a renovation of that sort since it was opened by the mighty worship Frank O'Connor, I think back in 1992 when that hall was opened. It's good to see you here this evening, your former worship, Mr O'Connor. Sustainability is a big piece of the market, that's true, but all those sustainability projects are paid for by a sustainable budget, and it must, going forward, the market must make a surplus to ensure that ratepayers aren't asked to dip into their coffers to prop up the market or fund its unsustainable projects in some way, shape or form. There's big challenges ahead financially for the market, but there's a huge array of opportunities of which we as a committee can tap into, and the community can tap into to benefit, to ensure that our community benefits, the council benefits, and the market is financially sustainable as well as environmentally and commercially sustainable. Also, looking forward to serving my residual of the term on the committee, and I thank the former councillors, Councillor Simic and Councillor Bond, for a huge contribution that they made to the committee, and Councillor Voss and I and my fellow committee members get to benefit hugely from the foundation that you've given to us, and we look forward to serving the market moving forward. So happy to move this motion and the report moving forward.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, thanks very much. So we'll now go back to the start presentation of reports, the 8.1, the presentation of the CEO report, issue 59. Any questions? There are no questions from the community. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Voss?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I just wanted to understand the total recordable injury rate is very high. Just wanted to understand why and what are we doing about that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, total recordable injury rate is just one of a number of health and safety metrics that the executive monitors on a monthly basis and is also reported to the audit committee. This particular indicator is quite volatile, where just one incident where medical treatment might have been required for a staff member or changes to the total number of hours worked across the entire organisation can make a significant difference to the results. So, for example, over the course of the last 12 months, one month we very thankfully had a result of 0, but in other months the result has been higher. So to smooth out this volatility, we've started reporting on this metric on a rolling 12-month average, but the Executive and the Audit Committee still see the monthly result as well. I'd just caution that a low result for this metric is not necessarily good because this particular indicator doesn't talk to the severity of incidents. So as a result, it's really important to consider this metric alongside a range of measures. Here at the City of Port Phillip, we take quite a broad definition of incident compared to other organisations. So we capture in our figures lost time injuries, alternative work, and other injuries requiring medical treatment. And in the unfortunate occurrence, if there was to be a fatality, that would also be captured as well per million hours worked. In terms of what we're doing to improve our commitment to occupational health and safety, we are currently very actively putting in place a health and safety management system, and that system contains a range of safety policies and procedures. We're also working very hard to build a safety culture, and so we have a process of safety shares at meetings, but also toolbox talks at some of our staff meetings, and we're encouraging a culture of reporting hazards and near misses. And finally, on those unfortunate occasions where people do incur an injury at work, we have a dedicated officer that works with those staff members to help plan a return to work program for them so that we can get them back into the workplace as quickly as possible.
Councillor Simic?
Thank you. Under Direction 1, we embrace difference and people belong. The In Our Backyard strategy implementation is still marked as off track, and some of the reasons for that are outlined in the report. But given that this is a project area, it's hugely important to so many people in our community. I'm wondering if officers can set out what steps Council is taking to address this issue. And if we can hope in the foreseeable future for this strategy to be brought back on track.
Do you want to handle this, Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to organise a fuller briefing for Council on progress against the In Our Backyard Action Plan. It's tracking off track because when we set that 12-month plan, there were a number of milestones which we were unable to meet. In terms of key projects, we are still waiting to hear on the Marlborough Street project. That process has taken well over, I think, 6 months now since the call for expressions of interest, and it's been a lot longer than that. Councillor Voss and I are working in the Fisherman's Bend Mayor's Forum. There's a paper coming up on affordable housing. We're also working with IMAP on a planning affordable housing pilot, and we are continuing to look at options in terms of the property pipeline. So Council have been briefed on that, and we'll be coming back to Council when Mr Keenan returns from leave with a series of recommendations to take forward the strategy. So we understand it's frustrating. It's off track, some of it because of milestones that we haven't met, and a large part of it because it's very reliant on receiving state government funding, and that's been particularly frustrating in terms of both the timing and response from the state government.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you. This might be a question for you, CEO, as well. I notice there's a new section in the CEO report, being strategic partnerships. I think it's a great addition. Just wondering why it's now in there.
Through Mr Mayor, this is a really important part of the work that Council does. A lot of our work is done through working with and through others. So we felt it was really important to include this in this report, a highlight of just some of the partnerships that we're involved in. and we've got ongoing partnerships such as the Inner South Metro Mayors Forum, the IMAP, which is the Inner Metro Action Plan Group, and also the new state government-sponsored Intermetropolitan Partnership, which are regular forums, but then we have particular partnerships around issues such as Fisherman's Bend, or working with a number of government agencies on different projects. So we thought it was a really important inclusion to just provide some highlights to the community in this section of the report.
Thank you. In that section, it talks about the South Melbourne Lifesaving Club. I'm curious about the timeline for the kiosk. When will that be open?
Good question. Ms. Davis?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The expression of interest for the kiosk will close shortly, and it's our intention to have an operator in time for Christmas.
Great. Councillor Voss?
One last one from me. Recently, we've had a lot of issues with our recycling. It's been going to landfill. However, Council has offered an alternative. People can bring their recycled materials to the depot. I'm actually just curious about how many people actually took up that offer. What was the tonnage that was collected, please?
Ms. Davis?
Through you, Mr Mayor. In terms of tonnage, there was 2.4 tonnes of glass dropped off at the depot and sent to a local processor. There was only 5 cubic metres worth of plastic, but it too was sent for recycling through a local processor. We don't have any figures yet for the paper and the cardboard because that went into our bulk bins and they haven't been measured. They're not full yet. But generally speaking, despite the best efforts of social media and the advertising, there wasn't a strong uptake by residents to drop their material. Nevertheless, it's important that some material was dropped off and it was dealt with appropriately.
Okay, so there are no further questions. Councillors, do we have a resolution? Moved Councillor Voss and seconded Councillor Simic. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Just as always, there's a lot of information in the CEO report, so I welcome it and for the transparency of what's actually going on in the organisation. And I also just wanted to point out that there is a terrific list of recognition that the organisation has recently been awarded, and I think that's important to call out as well.
Thank you. Councillor Simic? Any other councillors? Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. We now move to 9.1, a 2-year review of public drinking laws for streets and footpaths. We've got a long list of speakers. And Gary Mink is the first cab off the rank.
Is it on now? Yes. Good evening. My name is Gary Mink. I have a business, Bay City Burrito, here in St Kilda.
No, well.
Thank you. Sorry. Usually my loud American voice is told to shut down. But anyway, I guess I've got a few points I'd like to make. The law came into effect the 21st of November. And I have 2 brief comments, and then I have an alternative suggestion to, as a course of action for where we go next. And the reason I have a suggestion is because I feel that it's not a black and white issue. A lot of things are a black and white issue, and I think that the report actually makes every effort to make it a black and white issue. You know, that it's either a yes or no, and it's not a yes or no situation. You know, I've read the report. In terms of lifting the ban, based on the report, it does not look good for anybody who wants to see the ban lifted. I also just spoke with 4 police officers, because we get quite a few of the guys on the street. Are they getting younger? They must be, because they all look pretty young. Sorry, I know there's some buffs here. But anyway, great guys. They look like they're getting a lot younger these days, or I'm just getting older. I can understand the position as a ban enables our police to take a preemptive approach regardless if disruption is going to occur or not. I'm not sure I like the broader implications of that. Also, regarding the statistics, there are enough statistics in the report to make your head spin. I actually minored in statistics, but it still made me question a lot of things because there's a lot of numbers in there. But I would be foolish to challenge any one of the numbers put forward. Sometimes I think that is or was actually the purpose of using statistics for this, again, to make it a black or white issue. Statistics are trying to make it objective. It's not. It's a subjective. You know, whether we allow alcohol or not alcohol has so many implications on so many fronts that trying to make it an objective decision, I think it's wrong. Also, there's a statement. Traders believe drinking made the area unattractive, adversely affected business, and reduced perception for safety. But let's be realistic. Perception of safety is obviously something, and we talked about this at the last meeting, it's really something that, again, is hard to really put forward. The real factor between the perception of safety is probably more related to the number of homeless that we see on the street rather than who's drinking and who isn't drinking. And also, can the affected foreshore businesses who spoke so passionately and vigorously at the last minute unequivocally state that the absence of any further attacks from gangs from outside of St. Kilda stopped because of this drinking ban? I don't think so. You know, the traders that expressed these opinions at the last meeting, most likely those opinions selected for this report, have a business imperative to see the ban stick. And I'm speaking as a trader as well as I'm also part of the, I didn't mention that earlier, the Ackland Street Traders Association. But let me put forward that these opinions are mostly of my own. I can almost guarantee that the statement does not reflect the entire Ackland Street trader community. I would venture to say that it does not reflect an adequate sample of the entire local community either, even though we had quite a few people speaking. Actually, I hear something very different than what the statistics say. I actually hear repeatedly something akin to the effect of, what is a shame I can't go down to the beach with a beer or a glass of wine. How boring. You know, that's what I hear. So, and that's not a statistic, that's just what I hear asking people, and I do talk to a lot of people. In terms of my business, absolutely. My business, for one, has seen a decrease in the number of people who come in and purchase food to be enjoyed on the beach with a beer or wine. Okay? They can't do that anymore. They can go to foreshore business and drink on the beach inside those premises, but they can't do it the way they used to do it, and that is just to grab a beer and go sit on the beach. There's certainly been no upside to the ban for us, I'll be frank. Suggestion, and this is where I come to my suggestion. So I've gone through what I think statistically is wrong, because we're trying to make it an objective decision, and some of the statements that are far-reaching in general rather than really supportive of the broader picture. Given the importance of this decision to both vibrancy and business in general, I would suggest a removal of the ban for a short period. Let's create a control group. Okay, we went through this period of 2 years with the ban. Let's go through a period with the ban lifted. That's what you do with statistics. You don't just quote statistics without having a control group to work with it. And most statisticians will tell you that. Not only would a control environment help validate what really happened during this period, but I think it may also lead us to find other solutions. Maybe the ban shouldn't be all over the city, or excuse me, the area. Maybe it should only be between the beaches. Maybe we should allow them to drink on the beach. Maybe we should allow only cans. Why are we taking it's either black or white? It's not. There's other solutions. St. Kilda is known for an area that we're liberal. Do we not want to continue that? So my suggestion, as I stated, is one, I think the report is great, but I think it supports what it was meant to support. And two, I think there's other solutions that we haven't explored. And the only way to really do that is to create a control environment. I know that it might be costly, but I think at the end of the day, given the number of people involved in this, it's the best way to look at the situation. Maybe we'll find less extreme measures, and maybe that way we can make everybody happier.
We'll have to wind it up there. Gary.
I'm done.
So, Gary, can I just make one point to you?
Yes.
You talked about taking a beer to the beach. That's a different issue than what we're speaking about tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So tonight it's a and please correct me if I've got it wrong, but it's about our streets and footpaths. And so I agree that there's a real issue about beach parks. So there's a hierarchy. There's 3 different sets of regulations. One's streets and footpaths, which is the most restrictive. Then the beaches, which is less restrictive but still restricted, particularly in St Kilda. And then parks, which are less restricted again. So, I just wanted to explain that.
Then I have to apologise. My understanding, this is, whether today the ban is lifted or not, that this relates to the whole area and there are no
It does relate to the whole area, but only the streets and footpaths.
Okay, and then I have to claim ignorance because my understanding was that it included beaches and parks. And if that's the case, I still think a control group might be in order, but maybe
I get that. Okay. I'm married to a statistician, so control groups.
don't marry. No,
but that was a really good point. So I don't want to repudiate any of your points. I just wanted to try and hone that level of
then there's room. Then recognizing that, I guess my contention of perhaps looking for other alternatives still stands.
Great. Thanks very much, Gary. Can we get Acting Inspector Ron Kleinblatt and Superintendent Tony Silva?
It's just me, Mayor.
Oh, it's just you? Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
So firstly, can I thank you, Mayor, councillors and community for allowing me to speak on behalf of Victoria Police here tonight. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. My name's Tony Silva. I'm the Divisional Commander of this area, so the Port Phillip Council and the Stonington Council areas, and I've been there since December 2018. Prior to that, I held a corporate community engagement role for 3.5 years with a portfolio of multicultural, Aboriginal, human rights, LGBTI, young persons, seniors, mental health, including homelessness and disability. I inform you of this because it holds context in relation to this submission. There is no doubt this is a complex social issue, but alcohol is a recognised key driver of family violence and crime against the person. It also impacts heavily on crimes against property. My key goal as Divisional Commander is to reduce harm to the community and my staff and support the vulnerable communities in my area of operations. The data supplied by the Crime Stats Agency, cited in the evaluation report, shows a decrease in crime in the area of operations in discussion here today. Can I just highlight that crime in public place is down 14%. Crime against a person is down 13.25%. Assaults are down 18.05%. This is against the trend of the likes of our neighbours in Mordialloc and Chelsea, which saw an increase overall in crime during the period. The National Survey of Community Stats with satisfaction with policing, the NSCSP data, which is a public document, is provided quarterly. 2 relevant benchmarks are public safety, walking in day, and public safety, walking in night. In December 2017, walking in day scored 91.5% satisfaction. In December 18, it scored 93%, a 1.5% increase. Walking in night in December 2017 scored 51.5% in December in 2017. So in December 2018, it scored 56.8%. So that's a 5.3% increase. The state average is 52.8%. So we scored quite well, probably partly due to the alcohol bans, but also obviously the CCTV and other good work from the local partners as well. Also, during the 2018 event season, we saw a big decrease in public order issues, particularly on key events such as Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, Australia Day and St Kilda Festival. There was a noticeable decrease in high harm and high impact events such as affrays or mass gatherings of youths committing swarming offences such as robbery. I fear that if alcohol bans are not continued, this may increase once again. So the police response to public order issues is supported by a lot of our proactive strategies. Our planning model for the police is developed in the context of the whole community, respecting individual rights, human rights and the vulnerable communities. Every briefing on operations involves a component of human rights and managing vulnerable community members. Our people receive human rights training and have the afforded discretionary decision-making authority. We work with our local multicultural liaison unit. We plan to undertake proactive patrols on extreme heat days. This unit involves the Aboriginal Community Liaison Officer, the Youth Resource Officers and Youth Specialist Officers. We will once again this year run Operation Summer Safe, which will be run with extra police resources injected into the foreshore from Port Melbourne through to Frankston. I could tell you, if you ask, around the number of proactive joint initiatives with the Council, as well as local traders and other community members, if you ask. What I can say is that this year we've been planning hard around a precinct policing model. We've been assigning each sergeant with a precinct to work hand in hand with our local communities. We're hoping this will work well. There's also early discussions around the Pride Centre development with the stakeholders to ensure a safe and inclusive environment. Finally, I just want to talk a bit about homelessness. We do joint patrols with the Council and we work on a therapeutic basis and not enforcement as well. And this is in line with what's happening in Melbourne City. So when I was at the Priority Communities Division involved in a project there with the Melbourne City Council as well and the local police. So we're currently in the process of developing a homelessness court initiative out in this area as well, which currently runs within Melbourne. So this is with support of the Chief Magistrate and Melbourne Magistrates Court as well. So I just want to make it clear that under my leadership that we are, and my people will be centred not on enforcement, although that option is open to us, but around that therapeutic and that work across all of our partners. Just one more statement. There's a lot more we do other than just enforcement, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillors, are there any questions of Superintendent? I think you're off the hook. Thanks very much for that incredibly data-rich presentation.
Unfortunately, my life's full of data.
Sorry, Belinda Plunkett. Jason Rowder. Hi.
Jason Rowder, St Kilda. I'm a born and bred St Kilda resident and a big advocate for community safety within the area. I think Tony Keenan, Mary McGorry and Narelle Algie, who put together the 2-year review of public drinking laws, should be commended for the attention to detail within the report. This detailed report contains stats and data that clearly prove the 2-year trial has resulted in a significant improvement within Port Phillip. I'd just like to highlight a few points from the report. 2.71, residents and local traders continue to support the amendments to the local law. The majority of residents indicate that their perception of safety has improved. 2.72, both residents and traders indicate that there has been a decrease in the level of visibility in people drinking in shopping precincts since the alcohol ban came in. 2.81, the alcohol ban has improved the amenity within Port Phillip with a 24% reduction in complaints to council. 2.82, a further breakdown shows a 46% reduction in antisocial behaviour. 2.91, crime in public places has decreased by 14% since the alcohol ban came in. 2.101, according to feedback from local services, there has been no evidence to support the notion that the public drinking law has had an impact on the vulnerable community members. The significant positive response the alcohol ban has had, backed by stats and data, will surely be supported by all councillors and voted to continue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jason. David Blakely.
I'm David Blakely, St Kilda. I'm here representing Victoria Street Business Association as President. First, I've got a conflict of interest to declare. I drink, and I was tempted to go to the pub before. On a more serious note...
That's a licensed premise, there's no...
It is. now it's outdoors. We support the continuation of the drinking ban. We think it's made, particularly on Victoria Street, it's made a difference to the street and the safety. Safety has increased in the last year, notably. The drinking ban not alone has done it, also CTV, active policing with the council bylaws officers all helped change the safety on the street and the perception of safety. So we would like to see the continuation. Alcohol's, I think, still the number one drug that has the most effect on other people. Be it the vulnerable, the community we see, be it domestic violence, etc. Unfortunately, we don't have, in Australian society, maturity sometimes to consume alcohol in a rightful way. And I think removing it from the streets is a good thing. And the policing I've seen has been very soft-handed. I've seen from the police going on the beach, just telling backpackers to drink up and not drink on the beach. I've seen them act soft in a very soft manner to vulnerable people on the street. And on a segue, talking about Piss Alley, I support the renaming of it to Spencer P. Jones. I thought we could celebrate with placemaking. We could have a cowpunk music festival with amplified music. Thank you.
Okay. A bit off topic, but that's okay. I go off piste myself. Ala Kukareva.
Hi. Do I need to press anything here? Or
No, it's all going and we can all hear you.
My name is Ala Kokareva. I'm from 202 Kalal Street in Balaklava. My husband is dentist. We've met last time 2 years ago, and I told you how much we support disadvantaged people of St Kilda. My husband treats a lot of people who come to us with vouchers from health community services, and of course there are probably not enough funds on these vouchers. He always does more than whatever voucher allows. So I knew practically all people who used to drink on the street. I want you to know they are not homeless people. We support homeless people. Homeless people don't have money to buy alcohol. These people have addresses, and the reason they used to sit in front of Woolworths supermarket and drink is it because it was easier for them to pool funds. If someone has a couple of dollars and there is another guy with a couple of dollars, they can buy a bottle of wine for $4 from Woolworths. And while they sit and drink that wine, someone else comes, again with a couple of dollars, and they buy another bottle. And it goes on and on. Majority of these people, unfortunately, had mental illnesses. And as you are aware, alcohol exacerbates mental illness. And by the end of the day, these people would become aggressive. I've seen an incident of one of this group who was drinking, attacking elderly guy with a walker, with a bottle, because that elderly guy asked them to move or whatever he told them. It was a dangerous situation, and I just wanted to remind you about that. And thank you very much for putting that ban 2 years. It was a very good exercise. I have to say, I was surprised myself. Because I'm receptionist and I sit in front of our very wide glass window, I see Carlisle Street all day long. I sit basically on a Carlisle Street and I can see what's happened there. That area in front of Woolworths supermarket, which we were discussing 2 years ago, changed completely. I can see people actually using that seat to sit and eat ice cream, elderly ladies going to a supermarket, buying ice cream and sitting there and having it there. I've seen nursing mothers there on that seat. It would never, ever happen 2 years ago. It was just too dangerous because there were many people sitting and drinking there. Again, I want to say that homeless people are not, we're not scared of homeless people. They're not aggressive. People who drink alcohol sitting on the ground in large groups, these people may become aggressive and they are perceived danger. Look, we can't fight it, but it is dangerous for us when we pass large group of drunken people. We don't feel safe. So these 2 years been amazing. Thank you very much for this. And I would like to ask you to use your power and to allow people of St. Kilda to feel safe. Vulnerable people, older people who did not feel safe, passing through and going to do shopping on Woolworths or Coles. And families with kids. If you look at, St. Kilda Primary, now parents pick up kids and they go shopping with them. It would never happen 2 years ago because it wasn't just safe. So please make this ban permanent. I feel that it will make our community safer for all vulnerable people in the community who otherwise would not feel safe going shopping there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Rosie Vayner.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for having me. I'm Rosie Vayner. I have been a trader of Carlisle Street for over 30 years and a great consumer and believer of balaclava. Over the past 30 years, I've seen some horrific violent acts fuelled by the excessive open drinking that was allowed on Carlisle Street. This has included verbal abuse and physical abuse against women, children and the elderly, which I think is the most vulnerable people of our community. I've seen more bashings between those intoxicated at times and at times violent bashings against innocent bystanders than I can count. I've been spat on, verbally abused and even threatened in my own workplace, all because I refused to hand over cash or buy alcohol on their behalf. The drunken antisocial behaviour was a daily occurrence. We were calling the police up to 4 times a day. I want to emphasise how horrible it was to work or shop in the area. I was minimising leaving work to shop, keeping our door closed so the abusive language could not be heard. We felt like prisoners, even considering seriously closing our doors and closing the business. Local cafes, pubs and restaurants have liquor licences and are held responsible for their patrons' actions. Yet the council would allow for open drinking in a public space with no supervision. If the ban is overturned, should the council be accountable for any antisocial behaviour that is a result of the open drinking bylaw, as you expect any licensed venue to be? Since the ban, we have seen a huge change in the street. The violence has massively been reduced, and I thank you for that. Locals and visitors constantly comment to me how lovely the street is and how safer it now feels. It's such a delight to look out and see families and the elderly gathering on the benches that previously were occupied all day by people drinking, surrounded by their rubbish to which they would leave behind on the ground. Look, I love the diversity of balaclava. That's why we opened our business in Carlisle Street. After 30 years of being a trader, shopper and ratepayer, I've lived and breathed Carlisle Street. I feel I have the knowledge and experience, therefore qualifying me over the person that might visit the street on the odd occasion. I want Carlisle Street to be safe for all of the community for many years to come. I support the ban and I speak tonight on behalf of the Carlisle Street traders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Rosie. Yeah. Darren Robinson.
Hi all. My name's Darren Robinson and I'm a resident of St Kilda. Wish to reflect my support for the ban within St Kilda. I guess from my perspective, I look at the amenity and I think that I'm not the only person in the room who values the St Kilda amenity. I think it's something that as visitors come to our area, they are drawn by the amenity of St Kilda. I feel that it's something that is sacred to St Kilda and it's something that's sacred to all of us that we need to do whatever we can do to maintain it. What I've noticed is that unregulated alcohol consumption in the street drives behaviours that really impact the amenity for all, or the enjoyment of the amenity, being it a resident or a trader or a visitor to our community. And that worries me. And it's sort of as a father, as a husband, as a resident, as somebody who was showing people around St Kilda, anything that I can do to help them enjoy the amenity, I certainly support. And anything that sort of stops them supporting the amenity or stops their enjoying the amenity, I'm certainly against. I think that what I saw that impacted me directly was the challenges the police had in dealing with unregulated alcohol consumption on the beach and the deployment of resources. These resources were concentrated in an area, their behaviours which were criminal and antisocial, and as a consequence, behaviours which were occurring in my community up in St Kilda Hill weren't being supported by the police because they were too busy with the disruption from alcohol and alcohol behaviours. When the alcohol ban was introduced on the foreshore, what we saw was the police resources being redeployed to our area and the challenges which were on St Kilda Hill being addressed. I think the outcome from a community perspective is a safer and a more enjoyable amenity for all. And I'm worried that if we do not support and continue this ban, there'll be another emphasis around and challenge on the police resources to deal with these behaviours, and as a result other areas of our community which can and need policing will be neglected, and as a result those behaviours which are impacting residential, streets, etc. will again reduce the enjoyment of living in St Kilda. So I'd like to encourage you all to support our amenity and maintain the ban. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Darren. Someone by the name of Frank O'Connor. Welcome, former councillor of this and the former City of South Melbourne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Frank O'Connor, Albert Park. So, certainly this is a thorough report, but it's deficient because it continues to put residents from other parts of the municipality where there have never been any problems into an untenable position, particularly in relation to Council's own program of neighbourhood nargies. So in our local area, for many years, we've had a gathering of residents and we gather out on the footpath to consume food and drink leading up to Christmas. And when I saw this ban come in, I communicated with yourself, Mr Mayor, twice. Your response last year was that it was clearly, and to use your words, an unintended perverse outcome. And you weren't advocating, but you expected there might be widespread civil disobedience of the local law. And just a couple of weeks ago, you responded that perhaps if you did want to drink at your neighbourhood nagi, you go inside your gate. Well, it's a great way to kill off the whole neighbourliness of a neighbourhood nagi, where you gather together in the common space around your homes. You don't go in behind your gate. And I got some more detailed advice from staff around that same time, which recognised that there were implications for neighbourhood nagis. And there was a comment that it's unlikely, it talked about the fact that you need to apply for a special permit and a licence through the VCGLR. And it said, the advice said, it's unlikely any residents or group of neighbours would bother going through this process of obtaining a permit. So at this point in time, the gathering need to relocate to inside your front gate, the same sort of issue you raised, or a public park or reserve. Now again, neighbourhood nagis are meant to be your neighbourhood. People come out of their gate, they gather together on their footpath, on their nature strip, to have a get-together. And then clause 4.13 in your report tonight just concerned me even further, because it said the Victorian Commission for Gambling and Liquor Regulation advised that liquor licences do not override local laws. Instead, they work in parallel. If the local law bans the consumption of alcohol on a public street, then a temporary limited licence could not be applied. So if that's so, then you can't have a neighbourhood nagi and have a drink. You can have a dry one, but you can't come out on the street into your public area, your sense of space with your neighbours, and have a neighbourhood nagi. So I think what you've got before you, I accept many of the submissions that were made tonight. There have been, over a long period of time, significant problems around inappropriate things happening in particular areas. But it's not, the issue isn't consumption of alcohol, it's about excessive consumption of alcohol and the associated antisocial behaviour. I think this is a sledgehammer that's going to kill off a great idea which this council has had over many years, neighbourhood nagis, to try and solve a problem that you may have. So I'd suggest you should go back and rethink it a bit and tune it up.
Thanks very much. Councillors, questions? I've got one question, which involves the issues that Mr O'Connor raised. Is there a simple, I assume the answer is no, but is there a simple solution to the question of providing a temporary licence for, say, neighbourhood barbecues or neighbourhood gatherings?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the research that we have done today indicates there isn't a simple solution to that. As Mr O'Connor rightly points out, the report highlights that the Victorian Liquor and Gambling Licence Authority, the local law would override that. So the only solution is the one outlined in the report, which Mr O'Connor has an issue with, which is that you would take the alcohol inside your front fence boundary.
Councillor Voss.
Just wondering, Ms McGorry, if the local law could make an exception for neighbourhood nagis, and in that way they don't need to apply for a liquor licence, or do they still?
The advice we've received is that if the local law is in place, then it is in place.
Can I just ask a question? But I think what Councillor Voss is getting at, Ms Blair, if we redraft it slightly to exclude certain registered events.
Through you, Mr Mayor, what we would need to do is we would need to look if there was an addition to the local law which would actually specify that alcohol could be during a neighbourhood nagari. So if that's something that council wanted us to investigate, we would need to get some advice around if that was possible, and if it was possible, we would need to go through an appropriate consultation process to amend a local law.
Right. Could I ask you to perhaps think of a 3.7, the wording for 3.7, that we seek further advice on ways of accepting neighbourhood gatherings and parties from this. Permitted, yeah. Well, whatever's advised. No, I'm just asking a question. Yeah. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. My question is around the consultation that we did for this report. So I understand that there were intercept surveys done recently in the past couple of weeks. But outside of those intercept surveys done on Carlisle Street, who generally did we do consultation with? Was it a sort of widespread thing, or was it with people that had engaged with the process already?
Through you, Mr Mayor. 34 people, 34 individuals representing residents, traders, community service organisation and Victoria Police, and people who drink in public were consulted through key informant interviews, in addition to 162 people through the intercept survey. People were selected who had previously come into contact with council through petitions, customer inquiries and other means, who were either for or against the public drinking laws. The majority of individuals originally against the amended local law had altered their perspective. Also, individuals representing community service organisations and the Victoria Police.
So another question. Thank you for that. So another question. So where our stats variously compared with other municipalities such as Stonington, Melbourne, Glen Eira and Yarra. Tell me if I've missed any, because there are a few comparisons there. Are you able to tell us more about the alcohol restrictions in those municipalities?
In addition to the information that's actually in the council briefing report, the City of Yarra is currently undertaking a review of their local drinking laws for streets and footpaths, and currently they're in the process of actually making it stronger. Sorry, I appreciate that information, but I think what are the current restrictions in Stonington, Melbourne, Glen Eira and Yarra was the question. Do they currently have 24-hour bans? Do they have bans during the evening? Do they have unrestricted drinking? That was my question. Okay. So, as through you, Mr Mayor, through the council briefing, the City of Stonington currently doesn't allow the consumption of liquor in any public places without a permit, 24/7. The City of Glen Eira have restrictions from Caulfield alcohol-free zones on race meeting days. The City of Melbourne bans the consumption of alcohol in public places in the central business districts 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And the City of Bayside does not allow the consumption of alcohol on any roads or at any times. And Yarra? Yarra is currently the one that is currently being reviewed at the moment. They've already had one councillor report go up, and they're actually altering the wording, which is supposed to go to council, I believe, at the end of October, to actually make it stronger. The draft is actually out for consultation at the moment.
And the current restrictions are?
I'll have to double check on that one. Sorry, they're all confusing.
I'm not trying to be mean. I'm sorry. This is just the question that I want. So my understanding is that they have a ban on streets.
They have a.
Do you know the answer to this question, Councillor Baxter?
I believe that they actually have a ban on streets and footpaths 24/7.
Oh, so
Thank
in
you very
Yarra, they've
Yes.
got a 24/7 ban. Okay. Councillors, do we have a resolution? Councillor Bond. Well, you're moving the officers' rec, are you? We were talking about an amendment. Let's get it up. So it's moved and seconded by... No, that's good. Yeah. No, that's sound advice.
True, it needs to go to the same level of consultation as the reviews, though.
So there it is there. Andrew, can you see it? Just go to there now. Happy with it?
Great, thanks. Seconded by Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond.
Yes, I will be supporting the motion as it is up on the screen. I come from a position whereby when this originally came to council, I wasn't at the meeting, and had I been present, I probably wouldn't have supported it. I'm one of those who fundamentally, I think, as was mentioned by Gary from Bay City Burrito, one of those who believes in our individual freedoms and individual liberties, who believes we should be able to go down the beach and have a beer, or the park, or have a Sauv Blanc in the street out the front in Albert Park at your local gathering. It's a fundamental right that we should all be able to enjoy. But we're looking at since we introduced the ban, and we look at the evidence as per the report, and it's quite conclusive. Crime down 14% in Port Phillip compared to 7% in the city of Melbourne, 2% in the city of Yarra. Assaults down 18%, crimes against a person down 13%. It's very difficult to sit here and say exactly what caused every one of those incidents, and you're never going to be able to do that. So if you want to disbelieve these numbers, I'm sure someone will be able to find a way to disbelieve them. But when you look at it, it is quite conclusive. So, someone like myself who, as I said earlier, probably wouldn't have supported this 2 years ago, I think I've got no option here. These alcohol bans have improved the neighbourhoods of St Kilda and Balaclava in particular, but I'm sure it also has had some impact on the rest of Port Phillip. It's not just our two neighbourhoods. It's the rest of Port Phillip as well. It's hard to argue that reversing these would be a good outcome for the City of Port Phillip. It's been great that since these bans were introduced, our local laws officers have been able to work with the police and police these alcohol bans. We've seen right throughout the report that finding someone for drinking on the streets is a last resort. The police and our local laws have used the tip-out laws quite a bit. Most of the people who have been fined have not been Port Phillip residents. We've heard from some of the community services organisations that there's been negligible impact on the homeless and the disadvantaged in and around St Kilda. They haven't been impacted by these laws the way some feared they may have. So from that point of view, it's all good news as well. So I certainly commend my fellow councillors to supporting this and request that they also support it and that we continue this with this alcohol ban. As I said, it's unfortunate. No one likes a beer more than I do. So, I'm probably more impacted by most than this ban, and I wouldn't have supported it 2 years ago, but it's quite conclusive what's here in front of us, that people need to change their minds with this sort of evidence presented to us and continue with these bans because they have worked and they have made a difference on our streets. They aren't impacting the people that some feared they may have, so it's all a good outcome and we can continue. And with the police here, it'd be great. I know you've done some great work and you do try and, whenever you have spare resources, work with our officers. It'd be great to see some more out there. We always would love to see more police out on the streets policing these laws. We've put them in place, so hopefully we can see more than we have currently been getting. Not that we don't appreciate what it is that, with your limited resources, the efforts you have been putting into Fitzroy Street and Carlisle Street and many of our other streets, including Ackle Street. So, we'll be supporting these.
Can I just intervene? Thanks very much, Councillor Bond. Officers have suggested that we make it clearer by putting the words after the word enable, put the consumption of alcohol. To enable the public?
The public consumption of alcohol.
Consumption.
Because local law number 1 is not just about public drinking, it's about other things. So
alcohol.
Just for clarity from the second, would accept that.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much. Happy to second and obviously support the report and the motion that's come through this evening. It's a very, very detailed report, and Council should be proud of the results that sit within it. Going back in our time machines 2 years ago, I supported the motion, albeit I was snookered into that position in some respects, in that I would have preferred a more localised ban in terms of covering problem areas. So it's much more extensive than what I would have liked to, and there was some collateral damage in that, obviously, in terms of what we've seen tonight. Hopefully we can rectify some of that. But the results and the evidence base that we have upon us speaks for itself, and this council should be very proud that we saw an issue. The issue was brought to us by concerned locals, and those locals are still here today fighting for the results and the continuation of that decision from a couple of years ago. It's not often we get this many people come and speak to a reasonably procedural motion, and it shows how important this initiative was and this report is, particularly to residents and traders in St Kilda and Balaclava. So we should be proud of what we did 2 years ago, and we should be proud of the results that has caused in terms of community safety and protecting vulnerable people in our society. So I'm happy to support a fairly procedural motion to accept this report tonight, and I thank everybody that came here this evening, including Victoria Police. Thank you very much.
Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank everybody that came and spoke, and thank the officers for putting this report together. What I'd like to say is that for the sorts of data that we're trying to gather here, it's really difficult to try and pull this together and present a report, so I acknowledge the difficulties in that. I've heard a lot of people say the evidence is in, you cannot dispute it, and so yes, we've got crime down by a certain percentage in that period, and crime went up in Melbourne and Yarra So clearly the conclusion that you would draw from that is to say, that's amazing. Melbourne and Yarra should institute 24-hour alcohol street drinking bans on their streets and footpaths, except they already have them. That is the first red flag to say you cannot attribute that drop in crime to the alcohol ban because you've got different results with a full ban in different areas. There must be other factors, and you have to take those factors into account as much as possible. So to boil it down and say so simple, drop in crime since it was brought in is to look at data in isolation. You must compare it. You must take into account all of the different factors because there's clearly something different here that's what's been going on. So that was the first thing that flashed up for me, that there is something going on here and that there are other factors here. I also want to talk a little bit about the reporting, that there's a lot of inclusion of general information on alcohol and the harms of alcohol. So it talks about alcohol related ambulance presentations and those sorts of things. It doesn't those things are not specifically related to street drinking. They're related to all kinds of drinking, and it just sort of muddies the water when we're talking about that, because we are making a decision about street drinking here and what that means. What the report also talks about is it talks about alcohol-related assaults as people come out of licensed premises and then continue to drink, or they're intoxicated or whatever. We don't hold those licensed premises to account for putting these, ditching these people out onto the street. I ran nightclubs for years, and I've seen this behaviour where you tank people up, you take their money, and then when they get too rowdy, you kick them out, and then they go out on the street and they punch up with someone. That is not something that is good practice in nightclubs, and it's not something I ever approved of, but you see it. We don't. There's nothing that we're doing to hold licensed premises to account for that. That has nothing to do with people's right, people exercising their right to drink on the street. That's them drinking a licensed premise, coming out and punching someone. This law would have nothing to do with that. So when we talk about that being a problem, that's not a problem that's solved by this ban. In terms of the And also, in terms of the alcohol-related assaults at nighttime hours, we already had bans on drinking at nighttime hours anyway, so this ban makes no difference to that. So there is some issues here that, and I understand the difficulty in gathering this information, which is why we've gathered sort of quite a lot and put it in there, but a lot of it I feel muddies the waters and seems to make the case for something that the stats don't actually make the case for. It says there was a drop in complaints about public drinking. Well, there would be, because we banned it. So I assume there would be less public drinking. That makes sense. What we should be measuring is whether there was less harms due to public drinking. Also had some issues with the consultation that we did. I understand so the intercept surveys I think were good. They were done late in the piece, but certainly I live two streets back from Carlisle Street, and no one on my street or no one that I know in my neighbourhood was ever consulted about this or even knew that consultation was occurring. So it seems like we talked to the people who were most interested in this idea, and that will always lead to skewed results. I've heard a lot about the evils of alcohol and that we must regulate it because alcohol causes all sorts of problems in our society, and that's absolutely true. However, we're only talking about the public consumption of alcohol. We can't ban alcohol in people's households, and we can't ban it in licensed premises. And in fact, what we've seen is that when you do ban these things, harms increase. Rather than looking at a harm minimisation and legalisation model for things. So I understand alcohol is bad. That doesn't mean that banning it is necessarily going to fix those problems. I'd just like to finish up by saying that in Victoria, the laws around public drunkenness are actually being rolled back because the evidence is becoming more clear on this issue. I read in the local paper a quote from someone who was in favour of our ban that said you have to be cruel to be kind. What we're finding is that cruelty just leads to further harms. You be cruel to be cruel, you don't be cruel to be kind. The evidence points to harm minimisation as a far more effective, safe and cost-effective method of dealing with people who have issues with alcohol and other drugs. And this blanket ban not only demonises them and doesn't help them in any way whatsoever, but has other perverse side effects, like not allowing people in their communities to gather and have a drink together. Now, I understand that this amendment might try and fix some of that, but all that means is that we just have a two-class system where if you're, privileged enough to understand how to apply for a permit for your street party, you're going to be fine. But if you're, poor or you don't understand council processes, you're not. And that is not something that I would be particularly happy about. I would prefer that the law apply equally to everyone. So I won't be supporting the continuation of this ban. I don't think the data supports it. And I'm hoping that my fellow councillors will support that stance.
Thanks, Councillor Baxter. Anyone else? I might jump in and say a few words. I found it quite uplifting tonight to have the human documentation of what happened in Carlisle Street. This debate started in Carlisle Street because of the drinking opposite Woolies, and to have Ala Kokoreva and Rosie Vayner come out and say, we have positively changed the world, was sort of quite uplifting. You don't get many wins in local government that you can actually document. So I'm really I'm sitting here being pretty happy, and I will be voting to extend it. I just want to say a few things on the data. I really appreciated all the data that Superintendent Silver produced for us. And I accept the observations made by Gary and by Councillor Baxter about the difficulties of data. Does it have a correlation or a causation, or just measuring an unexplained trend? I accept those things, and I'm really moved by the human testimony about what's happened in Carlisle Street. Penultimately, also what I want to say is, why did we go, if the genesis of the problem was in Carlisle Street, why did we go for a universal ban? And that was motivated by the fear of relocation of problematic drinking, and I accepted that. And at the time I said to myself, there's going to be perverse outcomes, and Frank highlighted those perverse outcomes, and we're addressing them in 3.7. So, finally, what I want to do is say thank you to the officers for a very high calibre report. Well done. So I'll be voting in favour of this amended motion. Councillor Crawford.
I will be supporting this motion. Again, most of the problems that come before us are complex, and there is never one simple solution, and we always need to look at the big picture and hope that some of the decisions go a little of the way to making things better. And I do think that we are taking more than this decision to look at these issues. We have people on councils constantly working with the homeless and the disadvantaged and the people who may have problems with alcohol, whether they're drinking on the street or at home. That is part of what we do. And the police, as we so clearly heard tonight, are working from a therapeutic approach to try and link people in to services or better ways for them to live their life or improve their life. And this is not a solution that stands alone. It's not really a hammer, because it's just a part of a suite of things that we do to try and look after people in our community. But this particular law does directly, perhaps, look after the traders and the people who used to walk past, and that's what we've heard tonight. So in that way, it's a more direct response to them, but it doesn't mean we're not responding in many other ways. And I feel sure that the police, if there was inappropriate drinking happening on anyone's nagari, on their street party, if we manage to find a way through that, I'm sure the police will tip out their alcohol too if they're, participating in antisocial behaviour. I think it goes across the board. It wasn't so much, it was the excess and the antisocial behaviour that it causes, which is the downside of alcohol across the board. And I know that there are people arrested across not just our council community that get arrested for drunken behaviour, and I'm glad to hear that it's not going to be a criminal offence, because, so much more is behind. Obviously, our culture for drinking to excess is the starting point. However, I will be supporting this because on a local level we have heard, not conclusively, none of these social issues are ever conclusive, but there has been a marked improvement, particularly on Carlisle Street where this request came from initially. So thank you for coming to our officers and to the people speaking tonight, and I look forward to the police and our council officers and working with all the services around here to keep working with our disadvantaged, to keep working with people who have issues with alcohol, and just to keep working with our community at large. This is one decision, it's not the only decision that we make in this regard.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford. Is there any further speeches? I'll ask Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. Yes, thank you everyone who's come and continued to participate in this process. I just wanted to, I echo Councillor Baxter's concerns, and I think you've summarised them very clearly. Obviously, there are other municipalities that have taken this route, and there's not a correlation provable between the public drinking ban and some of the outcomes that we've seen. And I did just want to highlight that the officers are very careful to point out the difficulty of attribution in this report. So there were some statements made tonight, that this proves certain outcomes being related to the local law, and I wanted to highlight that the officers are careful not to draw that conclusion in the report. Obviously, we lacked a baseline evaluation around the impacts of the existing prior to the implementation of the blanket ban. And that makes assessing the results difficult. And also there have been a number of other actions taken during the period of the ban, which makes it very difficult to attribute the results to the local law itself. I am really pleased that we've seen such a startling reduction in crime during during this council term, essentially. I think it's a vindication of the renewed partnership approach that's been taken, and that result is arguable, and I thank the officers who've attended tonight, the police officers who've attended tonight to speak to the effectiveness. My concern with with taking a punitive approach to what is essentially a social issue has always remained, and I guess what I would highlight is that cooperative approach between Victoria Police and our council outreach officers doesn't rely on having a punitive trigger for intervention. The infringement element of our local law is not essential to that collaboration continuing, and so it does trouble me that we continue to push ahead with a punitive response to this issue at the same time that our state is acknowledging the detrimental impacts that a law and order response to social issues such as public drinking can have. Those views won't be a surprise. They're ones I highlighted earlier, and I continue to be concerned about it. When we initially approached this issue, I believe it was during the debate on the streets and footpaths element of our local law that I moved an alternate motion requesting a public health-centred approach to this issue. I remain slightly disappointed that I think that there's still a very strong focus on the action of drinking as opposed to the harms that can relate from alcohol consumption. Our city continues to have very above average levels of alcohol-related harm, and I really think that we would benefit from taking some best practice actions to addressing alcohol consumption as a whole and continue the work that we've done in the cultural change space, which I'm very strongly supportive of. I won't be supporting the continuation of this ban, given the concerns I've raised around a punitive response to a social issue. I do note that many of the behaviours complained of on the streets regarding aggression, violence, all of these things, these are moments when police have existing powers to intervene regardless of whether council implements a local law or not. There's been statements that there has been no evidence of negative implications for vulnerable populations. Having had personal experience as a pro bono lawyer working with people who accumulated public space infringements, I would say that it's actually not possible for us at this time to determine that, as often people who have received infringements and then at some point come into difficulty because of the accumulation of those fines, it can take years before they actually come into contact with legal service in order to seek assistance with those fines. So I remain concerned about that possibility. And I also note the admission by police in the evaluation report here that the law is effectively being used as a move-on power in certain circumstances to disperse people from the public, when they may not be taking any action that is actually causing harm or danger. So for me, that represents one of the feared outcomes that we were hoping to avoid. I note that there's been a fairly consistent response from those who have sought this as a punitive outcome to respond to public drinking, that they continue to support it, but that there was a very varied level of support and awareness amongst the intercept surveys. And so whilst I understand there's a group of people in the community who are very passionate about seeing these laws, I think that actually amongst the general public there is a much more varied view of and opinion and even awareness of the applicability of these opinions, and I thank those who've come and voiced different views tonight because it does demonstrate that level of awareness and sophistication, I guess, in our community that we consider these issues. The final point that I wanted to make was also that I'm disturbed by the amendment that's been placed on the law tonight, because to me it really does underline what my key concern about these laws is that we define some kinds of public drinking as okay, and some people are allowed to do it and some people are not, and unfortunately I think that the concerns voiced around the neighbourhood yagis really do illustrate that point, that there is evidence that these laws have been applied unequally in other municipalities, and not only have we acknowledged that that's likely to be the case in debates in this chamber, but we would like to create an exemption to allow that to continue. It's really troubling. I understand this is an issue that people feel very passionately about, and I thank everyone who's engaged with the process so far and the officers for the work that's gone into the report and evaluation.
Okay. Councillor Bond, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Councillor Gross. I won't dwell too much, just thank the residents that have come along tonight, the traders, the police, for coming along and showing us how much you care about this issue. So as I mentioned before, some of us have changed our minds on this, and no doubt it is the views put forward by the residents, traders and the police, but also the evidence in the report in front of us that has swayed some of us to change our minds from where we were 2 years ago. No amount of evidence will change some people's minds, so we just accept that in life and move on, I guess. So that's about all, Mr Mayor. I guess we put it to the vote.
Okay.
Can we vote under division?
Okay, I was afraid you'd say that. All those in favour? Councillor Crawford, Voss, Pearl, Gross and Bond. Those against? Councillor Simic, Copsey and Baxter. I declare the motion is passed. Thanks very much. Councillors, do you want a 5-minute break? We've got no more public speakers. We've just done 9.1. 10.1, Move, Connect, Live strategy, draft parking management policy for community consultation. The gallery is packed for this one. We could do it pretty quickly. There's no one from the community who wishes to speak on this. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Voss.
Thank you. Now, in the document, in the report, it talks about regular reporting on the success or otherwise of this policy. I'm just wondering, will that be via the CEO report? Has there been any thought about how that will be reported?
Through you, I'm going to be closer, sorry. Through you, Mr Mayor, the draft or proposed draft parking management policy does have a section in terms of ongoing monitoring and evaluation.
Good. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, there is a section on monitoring and evaluation as part of the proposed draft parking management policy. Within that, it does talk about regular reporting and a number of factors. The intent is that's provided as part of, on an annual basis, in terms of the fees and charges section, in terms of the number of permits, the number of parking spaces, and parking availability rates or occupancy rates in key areas of the municipality as part of the annual process of setting fees and charges for council.
Any further questions? Councillor Voss?
So, just from a process point of view, if a tenant, for example, of a property purchases 12 months worth of vouchers for a parking visitor's parking permit and then leaves, and then somebody else comes in, like in the next week, say 1 month into that 12-month tenancy, what would be the process to get new permits?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there is a section that alludes to or talks about applying for permits. In the particular scenario that is discussed, if those permits were used for the initial tenant, there is provision in the policy for those to be, I suppose, in terms of cancelled, and for the new tenant in terms of to apply as per the accepted mechanism or process in terms of evidence and otherwise of proof of residency, and that will then also be further developed through the procedures by council officers as part of developing this policy further.
Okay, I sense that's been asked and answered. Councillor Crawford? You're happy to move? So we have a councillor who's happy to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Voss? Councillor Crawford?
I'm actually pretty excited to be moving this strategy to go out to consultation. So lately in the world, just bear with me for a moment, it does go somewhere. Lately in the world, you know, I've been getting quite down because often we're kind of living in this world of social media and this sort of, not the word is not highlighting, but this reverence for me, and the individualism. And actually, I think we are better as a society and as a community when we think about each other and help each other out. And I think the focus has really shifted in the world over my lifetime. And I think this parking policy, I'm going to ask you, because I hope lots of you feed into it, because I think it's a very good document. But I'm going to ask you to look at it with different eyes. That this strategy for parking for the future of our densifying city is actually about us as a community. It's not about you and that car space just in front of your house, which is technically not yours. It's collectively a council asset. I'm going to ask you to look at, are the policies in this strategy a good foundation for managing the growth that is coming and is upon us now? So that the policy is not just about you and that car spot, but it's about, will it make it easier for your elderly neighbour next door to have more options if there's a precinct parking? Is it going to make it fairer when some people have excessive numbers of parking permits when there's actually not spaces for them, and not everyone has that excessive number of permits? So reducing the loopholes, is that fairer? Is it fairer to look at ways that we can cut down the cost for some people, because you may not really visit a parking all year round, but only a number of times, a handful of times in the year? Is it fairer to actually make the most of the parking we have, the limited parking we have, the best way we can, and to slowly implement it over time? So please feed into this, but please feed into it from that collective thing that we have certain parameters we have to deal with as a council and as a community, and that we need to all make a little adjustment to how we get around a municipality, and parking is a key part of it. So now I'm not asking you to consider big change, but perhaps the change we make collectively when we agree to some kind of new parking policy like this is that maybe you take a walk to the local shops or cafe instead of driving your car once a week, or maybe you walk to the gym instead of driving, or whatever it looks like. But all the small adjustments that can keep us healthier, more connected to our environment, and maybe walk past some people and say hello. All the little things we can do using a share car is better for our environment, for our pockets, our wallets in using share car or public transport. Maybe having a conversation next to the person you're sitting on at the tram. Maybe all these little adjustments we do in how we get around our city can actually make us happier and a better city and a more connected city. Personally, not just in that physical transportation kind of way. So I know it's a bit esoteric and a bit heartfelt for a parking policy, but there's been some really serious thinking going into this policy because it's a big one. I think probably parking is the number one issue on all council issues that people contact us about. But we need to do it fairer. We need to do it in a much more practical way. And we need to do it slowly so people have time to adjust our behaviours. Really, there's hardly any changes coming down the line to 2025, but they will be fairer. And this is a basis on which to build that, you know, that new framework of parking that we need in a city. We can't ignore it. We have to be brave and address it. So I do ask, when you look at it, please look at it with community eyes, not just about the parking space in front of your house.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you. You know, this is going to be controversial. So I'm taking I'm not taking a break from council work. No. So very few people like change, and that's one thing you learn very quickly when you get on council. But I'm actually happy to see this go out there because I want to see what people think. This will be a very big change for many people, but it's going to be implemented incrementally over time, as Councillor Crawford said, actually quite a long time. This is a draft policy, and it proposes changes to residential permits, foreshore permits, visitor permits and temporary permits. It allows time for change, it's quite flexible, and I believe it's a good thing, and it is very fair. It does exclude from this draft policy developing more council car parks. It excludes reducing controlled car parking or increasing on-street car parking. So there are a few things that are excluded from the scope. But what it does recommend is that there be more turnover in car parking places in higher demand areas. Everyone's sick around me. This policy recommends, as in Table 2 of the report, that there is parking categories. For example, we've got premium parking. Let's say a premium park might be something outside a post office. And if you're going to the post office by car, for example, you'd want to get a car park right outside. So the post office parking spot is for 15 minutes only. So we want to make sure that we have high availability there, so that everyone can use it, but only for a very short period of time. And then we have other categories such as medium parking, which we say 1 in 5 spots should be available. So, and those spots might be for, say, 30 minutes to 4 hours, and that they would be, say, 1 minute walk away from where you need to get. So that's what we call medium parking. I fully support this sort of thinking because I think we need to say in that sort of area, yes, 1 in 5 or so parks needs to be available for you to use. We have a lot of problems in our city as we've got more cars than we have street car spots. We've got more permits issued in some places than we actually have car spots. We have legacy arrangements that really need updating. It's been 20 years since Council has modified this policy. It is now time. We've got more people coming into our municipality. We've got 7 people approximately every single day coming in, about 50 people a week. We need to manage our car spots. But there are some areas that I do feel a little uncomfortable with, and that's the residential properties that have a garage and a crossover, that they will eventually not be entitled to as many residential permits as someone without a crossover and a garage. I'm not keen to have regulation for regulation's sake. It does need to be meaningful and obviously a stepping stone to our future. But the objective of finding ways for more people to use parking space more often and ultimately making it much easier for people to get around our municipality is really worth the change. So I'm looking forward to the results that are going to come back from this consultation in February 2020 next year. But as Councillor Crawford said, please look at this widely and not just about the park in front of your own house. So thank you.
Councillor Simic.
I agree with the comments that have been made so far and have been put so eloquently by Councillor Crawford and Councillor Voss. I agree that this will probably stir quite a lot of discussion in our community, but just wanted anybody who's watching at home or listening to this to know that we can all be contacted and are keen to hear your views and talk through any of the issues that you might foresee. As well as the officers, we suspect that there'll be quite a bit of community consultation through this process, and ultimately we'll come to an outcome. And unfortunately, not everyone's going to be happy, but it will be an outcome which will be in line with our Move, Live and Connect strategy, and hopefully improve the circumstances that we're in. They're unavoidable, the situation that we're in. We've got more and more people living in our area, and we just can't actually make more car parks because it's not possible. So that's the situation we're in. So thank you everyone for your patience, and look forward to the discussion ahead.
Okay, we go to the vote? Sure. This is your
I just urge my fellow councillors, we live in an area where luckily most of us can walk within 10 minutes to great facilities and infrastructure. And so in some ways, this policy reflects our ability to do that. We don't need a car as much as some municipalities do. And we need to be bold and brave in how we make it fairer. We could stick our head in the sand, but we've chosen not to. It would be remiss of us to not address these issues now before they become worse. So I urge you to support going out to consultation.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Thanks. Division required. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Simic, Baxter, Voss, Gross, Crawford. All those against? Councillor Pearl, Councillor Bond. Thanks very much, everyone. Okay.
Who wants to walk to the car parks to park?
14.1, lifting of the confidentiality status of information considered by Council in closed meetings of Council. Moved Councillor Voss, seconded Councillor Copsey. All those in favour? That's unanimous. 14.2 we've done. 15.1, motions for Dockless electric scooters. Now, I'm going to move this because it's a notice of motion, but we've got several in great additions and amendments. Can we start with Councillor Baxter's?
Do you need a seconder for your motion before we look at it?
Oh yeah, I need a seconder. So seconded by Councillor Crawford. Sorry? Okay, I'll speak to it. Active transport in the city of Port Phillip has had a fairly rocky run recently. The O-Bike's Dockless bike was not a catastrophe. It was less than a catastrophe, but it was... Yeah, less than a catastrophe, but it was a shooting star. Most of it ended up as being urban art in the canal. And then we had the demise of the blue bikes, which I found incredibly regrettable. I have to say, because I own my own bike, I haven't used the blue bikes, but in other cities I have used the blue bikes, and so I mourned their passing even though I didn't particularly use them. So that's been an inauspicious week for active transport. So now we have a new solution that's being adopted around the world, and I've observed it in Brisbane, and I was, to be frank, really impressed. Now, there are many issues with this, so it needs a trial. The motion talks about 2 operators, and we have to be competitively neutral and make ourselves, fair in judging who those 2 operators should be. And I think that it's a really exciting addition to our choice of transport options. I actually think that it could be much more exciting in the outer suburbs, because we can't forget that 2/3 of Melburnians really aren't within walking distance of a train or a tram, even though we've got the biggest tram network in the world. So how do people get to these tram or trains? The catastrophic vision is to drive there and populate huge at-grade car parks around every station. A better vision for me would be some form of active transport, and this is one form of active transport that might fit the bill. So I think it's important to trial. I think it's important to have an open mind. And I think it's important to learn the lessons of O-Bike, and I feel that's what we've been doing. So I commend this trial to you, my fellow councillors, and I'm absolutely happy to accept any suggestions of amendments to make sure that it accords more completely with your views on how this trial should proceed. Seconder, Councillor Crawford.
I just think as a big metropolitan city in Australia, we need to get on and have a trial and check this out. And we also like to be a council of firsts. So why don't we be the first council in Melbourne to trial the electric scooter? And we, on the back of that parking speech I just gave, I think we're looking at other ways for us community to get around, but it's not a car always. So here's another choice. So let's see how it goes.
Thanks. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move an amendment. So I think the staff have my amendment. But it basically, what is being amended there is that the so in section number 4.
Sure.
We don't know number 2 anymore.
Yeah, so my amendment didn't have number 2 in it. That was Councillor Crawford's one, and
It's repeating.
Yeah.
I'll just get this up for you. Delete 2.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with number 2? That looks like a.
It's repeating. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I'm assuming that all of those will be renumbered. But yeah, so it'll be a change in number 3 there, that instead of talking about geographically defined areas such as the foreshore business activity centres, that it would specifically say that it would be geographically defined areas of our municipality to complement our existing active and public transport routes, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. Also, I would say that my amendment.
Can I go through this one by one? So talk to that amendment, because I've got some.
No, this is a full amendment. So I need a,
have you got a seconder for that amendment, Councillor Simic?
Well, I was actually just detailing what the differences are in the amendment, but I can speak to it when I'm done doing that. Yeah, I need to fix a couple of things as well.
He's got it up, and it's been seconded by Councillor Simic.
Okay, so the amendment on the screen. I know. The amendment on the screen is not actually my amendment, because there's another change that needs to be made. So in number 4, it says 1,000. My amendment says 500. So it should just be 500. Thank you, and all of the rest of that looks like my stuff. Cool. So I just need to make sure
it's
it was
been
right.
seconded by Councillor Simic. So
do you want me to speak to it now?
Speak to it now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So basically, we've got an opportunity here. So look, e-scooters. I think if we have e-scooters in our city, we can have one of two sort of options. We can have a sort of semi-active transport complement to our existing network that assists with the first and last mile and fills in the gaps of our public transport and active transport systems.
Could I ask you to speak to the actual amendments that you're positing? So why have you got all those things in red? This is a speech about amendment.
Okay. So, I'll specifically talk about the amendments. the reason why...
well, you've moved them and I want you to explain them.
Okay, so the reason why number 3 is changing is so that I don't think that the geographically defined areas should be restricted to the foreshore or business activity centres. I think it should actually... the aim of this should be to fill in the gaps of our existing active and public transport routes and to complement them in that way. So that seems to me better wording. The 500 was in the original motion, so that isn't technically an amendment on my part. The change from the trial being cost neutral to having no revenue loss is that I'm happy for us to make some money on this. I just don't want us to lose money on this. I just want to specifically lay it out. That's all. Okay. Just anyway. So and number 7, rather than noting that this trial aligns with the Council's Move, Connect, Live strategy, we don't actually know all the parameters of the trial just yet, so I would instead say that it should require the trial to align with our Move, Connect, Live strategy.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Does the seconder wish to speak to it? I'm going to ask some questions of the councillors, of the officers, if I may. Just as... Yeah. So let's be frank, I asked the officers to draft this, so I'm not invested in any words. I'm happy to change the words, but I just want to look at the consequences. So the geo-definition of the areas, what's your advice about what's the appropriate way of defining the areas?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Council has some options to consider in terms of the definition of the defined areas. Currently it reads that it will complement our existing active and public transport routes. So we'll be looking at buses, trams and trains. And then it adds that the locations to be determined by the Chief Executive Officer or his delegate. If Council wishes to expand that and be clarified that it could consider other areas within the municipality, you're free to do so. But currently it specifies the active and public transport routes.
Mr. CEO?
Would that also, through you, Mr Mayor, would that also include bike routes? That's an active transport route?
Yes, it could.
Thank you.
But isn't that so if it's the foreshore, isn't that a bit restrictive? I mean, we don't. Yeah. So if the scooters were used to go along the foreshore, say, that isn't currently. There's no public transport from Port to St Kilda. There's a bus. Oh, okay. So that wouldn't exclude the foreshore, would it? Okay, I'm happy with that.
So just to clarify, the intent of that is to complement, not duplicate our existing network, but to complement it by filling in gaps and using the infrastructure where appropriate. So yeah, it wouldn't exclude anywhere unless it was extremely well serviced and other scooters were needed elsewhere.
Right. I'm a bit worried because some of the scooters will go from a popular station like. Anyway, okay. Okay, so does anyone else wish to speak about that first amendment?
Just a question on the revenue loss. So there will be no revenue loss, as I can see, in terms of permit income or parking income, etc. So I didn't agree with the cost neutral, but I don't think revenue is the right word.
Just to clarify, would it be better to say no financial loss to council?
That's for you to determine, but I would think that would be very difficult to achieve, and that would stop the trial from going forward.
So I'm not sure, like, are 500 scooters enough for the trial if it's two different... I just don't know, like, is that enough? I have no idea about the spread. Do we need to do a higher amount just to allow? They may have less. I'm just wondering if we limit it to a number, and do we need to be a bit more open in our EOI?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Examples of where trials have happened in other locations, what we've found is that usually they start off with a smaller number, and then after the trial and the demand and also the performance of the trial is actually monitored, and then there's the opportunity to actually look at that figure and actually go for a higher number of scooters. As an example, in Brisbane, the initial trial in Brisbane started off with around 200 to 400 scooters, and then after the trial and it was monitored with the demand, that actually went up to a figure of 750 with the cap. As part of Adelaide, the first trial, which went for 3 months as part of the Fringe Festival, they started with a trial of 500 scooters, and that's basically been monitored, and the performance of that trial has been examined, and now they're looking at going up to around about 500 scooters per operator, and they've got 2 operators. So.
Sure.
So, if during the trial we're getting higher demand, say because it's summer and it will be the peak time to possibly use these scooters, is there ability for that number to increase during the trial period, or will we have to wait till after? There would be flexibility in the MOU or contract?
That can be looked at, and essentially the increase of the amount of scooters would be subject to reviewing the demand and also the performance of the scooters, and then that could be part of the initial trial agreement. Yep.
Just to clarify, through you, Mr. Mayor, it does say up to 500, so the figure would have to be altered if we were to trial additional scooters. So if
yeah, 500's the current original motion says.
So I just want to clarify again, sorry. If it says up to 500 scooters, that means that there could be no change during the trial period if there's demand? Or could we come back and, relook at it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would have to be subject to the performance and the demand through the trial period, and then it would have to be looked at after the trial period.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. The way that motion reads, it would be a maximum of 500 in the trial period. You'd have to change that if you wanted to give us capacity in the trial to go above 500. That clearly says up to 500. I would take that as a direction from council. We can help you with words on another amendment if you want to do that, but I would read that as saying it's a maximum of 500, even though it says contingent on demand. There would be a reduction from 500 contingent on demand, but it would be a maximum of 500. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm concerned that we don't know anything about these. What happens if we need more? What happens if we need less? To have a proper trial. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's all my clarifying questions. Are there any other speakers on the amendments? Councillor Voss.
Just in the event.
So,
no, I vote against it just because I don't think it adds much other than 7. I think 7's a good addition. 5, I think we should get rid of 5. If this passes or fails, I think we should just get rid of it, because I can't see how this trial's going to work being cost neutral or anything else. It's going to cost council money, so if we want to do it, it's going to cost us money, let's just do it. So I don't really think that's a valid thing to do, but that's really 5. The amendment doesn't make sense, and it actually potentially contradicts the ability for the motion to go ahead. 3 and 4 are semantics.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a clarifying question of the officers? Does Section 5, is there a serious problem with Section 5 that would prevent the trial from going ahead?
The amendment or the substantive?
The Section 5 as it is in the amendment.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Councillor Pearl.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're not anticipating that that we get revenue per se, but through the contractual agreement, we're looking to get some fees, or to charge some fees that will cover the cost of administration, compliance and evaluation activities. So that's the intent of that section of the recommendation. So that we intend to pass on the costs, I guess. There might be some additional officer hours, just to clarify. So there might be some officer hours that are required in terms of compliance. So there is a slight risk, but that's the aim.
Okay,
no, it's not revenue.
Sorry. Yep.
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, to answer Councillor Bates's question, in addition to Ms. Rosick's answer, I think the cost neutral is a better description because I guess it's budget neutral rather than cost neutral. So we would use existing officer time. We wouldn't be putting a budget bid in to do the trial, and we would cover any costs through fees charged through the EOI process. Is that correct, Ms. Rosic? I think the proper term is probably
correct.
budget neutral, so
That
you don't
is
have
correct.
to put extra budget in.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I request then that we just change the wording to budget neutral? And if that's not a significant change, then I don't think we need to vote on it. I just need to check that the seconder is okay with it.
So are you happy with that? Okay, so this is the way I wish to proceed. I'm going to go paragraph by paragraph about these and treat them as different amendments in parts. Why? Because some are acceptable and some might not be.
Point of order.
Councillor Baxter has to agree that it be taken in parts.
Do you agree then that it be taken in parts?
Okay,
so that's a no.
This is my amendment to the motion.
Okay, let's vote on the whole thing. So we're now voting on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendments in red? All those against? 4-3. I think it's 4-3. You can abstain now. Okay, so I declare that lost. Let's go back to the substantive motion.
Can I please move an amendment?
Okay, Councillor Copsey, did you have a...
Well, seeing as there seemed to be some appetite for parts of the amendment, I would like to put the words to... sorry, if we can go back to the slide with the red. It was
Could we go back to the one in red? Sorry about this.
So the additions to 3 and 7 and remove the red from 4 and 5.
Point of order, I would argue that under local law that's already been considered by council.
I think that's right.
The decision's already been made.
This is a separate motion considering...
Let's get some advice. So the question is, can we reconsider it in parts given that we've already voted on it? It's got to be a different amendment.
As long as it's different to what even that part's the same. Well, if there's some parts of it.
Okay, so I've been advised, and I'm going to take this advice, that amendments can be moved as long as it's different to the amendment that was lost, but it may include parts of that amendment that was lost.
Thank you. All right. So just reading the room there, I think that some of the elements of the, I think there was some confusion, firstly, while that vote was being taken. So sections 4 and 5 revert to the original motion as in the papers and put by Councillor Gross.
That says cost neutral.
Thank you, officers, and just note, yep.
So is there a second of, so you want 3, 5 and 7?
No, 5 is reverted to what was on the papers in your original motion.
Okay, so you want 3 and 7?
3 and 7 have the additions in red.
Great. Okay, so is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Crawford. Do you wish to speak to that?
Great. All right. So to clarify, we've already spoken a bit about Section 3. In my view, this actually broadens slightly the delegation that's given to the CEO to make sure that these scooters aren't restricted to areas like the foreshore and activity centres. To my mind, that's beneficial. They still can be placed in the foreshore and activity centres, places that people already want to go, but I think it does also pick up and allows the CEO under delegation to act in accordance with our Move, Connect, Live strategy, recognising that there are gaps in our active and public transport routes that we may want to fill with last mile options such as scooters. So that's the only intent of this, and I think it aligns the motion slightly more with our endorsed transport strategy. And 7, I think, again, strengthens the alignment with our agreed strategy. So that's essentially all it is. I really highly endorse the Mayor in bringing this motion, and I'm simply seeking to align it with our existing positions.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Councillor Copsey, under Section 3, would there be any areas of the city that would not meet the definition that you've put in there to complement our existing active public transport routes? Is there any area of the city that would not be covered by that?
No. It's to give the CEO some direction in considering which areas of the city would be most appropriate for the trial.
So why is the amendment required?
As I've said, to align with our agreed strategies under Move, Connect, Live.
Look, I'm going to vote in favour of this. Can I just say, if we want a robust trial, we want to have, the maximum flexibility with our CEO or delegates to liaise with the two companies and make decisions. I think we've made it a little bit narrow, but we can always entertain an urgent motion at a council meeting. Seconder, do you wish to speak? No? Let's go for these amendments. All those in favour? All those against? Declare it carried. I'll go to the main substantive motion. Do people wish to speak to it? It's been spoken to by the mover and the seconder. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I enjoy the opportunity to speak in a way that I wasn't given before.
I take that as a criticism, a just criticism. Yeah. I apologise.
But I think we're basically at an identical motion to what I put up, which is good. And Councillor Pell may still be confused and has shown his confusion throughout this entire debate.
Okay,
that's
order.
great. But
I won't.
Point of order, ask Councillor Baxter to stick to his day job and speak to the motion at hand.
Yes.
Okay. Snide comments aside, this is a really important motion.
This
is a really important motion. It's, as I said, there's a massive opportunity here for electric scooters to be able to fill the gaps in our active and public transport networks. I don't know what that sound is either. But there are a couple of different ways that this can go. So the best outcome is that people are able to use these electric scooters for your first and last mile, that it takes cars off of the roads because people in Elwood can use this to get to, say, Elsternwick Station and take a train, or to Ripponlea, or to get a tram or something like that. That would be the best outcome. The worst outcome would be that these would clutter up the foreshore area, replicate existing public transport and active transport routes, rather than taking anybody out of cars, simply relocating them from public transport onto privately owned scooters, and privatising public land for private use. That's the doomsday scenario, obviously, but there are risks here when we're looking at this. So. The intention of the amendments here, which I thank Councillor Copsey for getting right, where I got them wrong, I guess, is to make sure that we can just safeguard our community and our strategies and what we want to do with transport in the best way possible. And I look forward to working with whoever happens to be successful in an EOI to achieve those aims, and I'm sure I'd be very happy to jump on a scooter and give it a crack.
Thanks very much. Councillor Simic.
Look, I'm really quite excited that we're moving to a trial on this. I think it's about time, and it's fantastic that we'll be leading Victoria in this. I've used the electric scooters in other parts of Australia, and I've used them overseas as well. And it's now time that we start being able to use them here in the city of Port Phillip. It's very exciting.
Councillor Voss.
Yeah, thank you for this. I'm keen to see the e-scooters here in the city of Port Phillip, and I've had quite a bit of experience recently, in particular in Europe, in many countries, using up to about 5 different brands at the one time, 5 different members of my family on different scooters. No, I tell you what, because there is issues that you can't use one app on your phone. You can't use multiple scooters. You can't, so kids, they don't have a phone, and I had a phone, and so you have to actually have multiple. Anyway, there are limitations. I love them. I think they're a huge amount of fun. I felt like I was like 13 again riding them, and they are a great option. But I tell you why I voted against the amendment, and that is because this is for a trial. A trial, I think, needs to be limited. It needs to be clearly defined, and it needs to be measurable. And I think having just the foreshore and the business activity centres is exactly that. And then after the trial, should it be successful, then we can open it up to the rest of the community. The way this is at the moment, it's pretty much open slather everywhere, and I think there might be issues. But anyway, that debate has been lost, but that is the reason why I think we do need a trial, and we're going to do a trial. But I'm disappointed that it's going that possibly be everywhere. But I was looking forward to it being in quite limited places. Thank you.
Councillor Pearl.
Well done, Councillor Gross, for bringing this forward. We're all a bit gun-shy after the disaster that those awful yellow bikes produced, and unfortunately the blue bikes are now dead, largely because they were financially unsustainable, the yellow bikes and the free tram zone. I think the free tram zone killed the blue bikes in terms of making it cost ineffective to use around the city. Why would you ride a bike for $3 up to one end of the town to the other when you can do it for free on a tram?
Point of order, could Councillor Pearl stick to his day job and speak to the motion at hand? Thank you.
No, I think it was actually relevant. I rule that out of order. Come on, Councillor Pearl.
Calm down, right? You can see you shaking. So I think you've done a good job, and I'll support the rest of our councillors to vote for this. We just need to get a trial done. I've used it in Brisbane. I think it's pretty straightforward. There's some strange things there in Brisbane that you can only use them on footpaths, and I don't know if you can actually use them on some of the bike paths or express routes they have there, but I'm interested to see. I think this will work a lot better than the disastrous yellow bikes did, and I have a feeling the way the ecosystem of this model works, it'll be much more embraced by our community in terms of charging them, looking after them, hopefully a bit of husbandry. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we'll move on and do something else. Happy to support it. Thanks for bringing it to council.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey.
Yeah, it's all been said very eloquently. I think this is really timely. It's quite frustrating that we still haven't sort of got shared mobility right in this state, and I really am very supportive of the proactive stance that the Mayor is putting forward in this motion so that we can help to drive a bit of the conversation about how that can work well. And I think it was really unfortunate because shared mobility has such promise for helping us not only achieve our goals as a council of having a city that flows better, but as you've noted, Councillor Voss, of having ways of moving around the city that are more fun and better for our health as well. There's real benefits if we can get this right. So I'm very, very distressed that the blue bikes are no more. I've been doing a little bit of an audit as I make my commute along the foreshore, and I've seen, especially on good days, sunny days,
they're empty.
a dozen bikes, out and about being used. So I have no doubt that the utilisation in Port Phillip was much higher than the general utilisation figures reported for the blue bikes, and I'm very sad that we weren't able to, despite having some initial discussions, see those prolonged. Well, here is something that might help fill the gap, and I really look forward to seeing the trial roll out. I hear the concerns that Councillor Voss has raised. I do note that 3 still talks about geographically defined areas. So I do think that the CEO will no doubt take this motion and come up with a functional and testable trial that results in a good outcome that we can, move forward from. Thanks very much, Councillor Gross, for bringing it.
Pleasure. Well, I might close. It was quite influential for me when we were discussing it that Councillor Voss said, we loved it and we're into it, so that was very persuasive, whether you like that or not. And that's when something went off in my head that it might be good for us. So, secondly, I wanted to say why it should be different to O-bikes in that these have to be juiced up at night. So part of the business model of these scooters is different to O-bikes because they have to be recharged at night, and also part of the way we, and I haven't put this in the thing, I'm just making it as an observation, part of the way we assess the business models is going to be critical to how successful this will be. And finally, I just wanted to say that, a robust trial might need some flexibility that we might have to revisit later on, que sera, sera. If we have to revisit, we have to revisit. So thanks very much for your support, and I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare it carried. Thanks very much.
Can I request a division, please?
Okay, all those in favour? Councillors Baxter, Crawford, Voss, Gross, Pearl, Simic and Copsey. Against? Councillor Bond. Thanks very much. I'll now move to 15.2. Motion for Waste Management Review was an... Did you... prescient motion that's been moved by Councillor Simic on a notice of motion. So you're moving that?
Yes, Mayor. I wish to move the motion as advertised in the council papers.
And can we have a seconder? Seconder? Councillor Baxter? Oh, did you have a question, Councillor Pearl?
Councillor Simic, thanks for bringing the motion. Is there anything in this motion that isn't already being done by council? And that's a sincere question.
I think that's a very difficult question, actually, because...
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's... it's been moved and seconded. Let's go to the speeches if you want to make them.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, is it okay? Thank you, Mayor. I believe it's really important for us to be discussing this motion because some of the work, as the motion suggests, is already underway. But more broadly, it's also an opportunity for us to look at what we can do in light of what's happening. And Mayor, we all want a clean, sustainable future for our community and our planet, but Victoria is in the midst of a plastic waste and recycling crisis. Our council recently faced a catastrophic situation where a recycler closed its doors. We weren't the only ones caught out. Many other councils across Victoria were also impacted. Across Victoria, this resulted in thousands of tonnes of recycling going to landfill. Many in our community rightly pointed out that this is unacceptable. And my concern is that it could happen again. We set out 4 priority areas in our waste strategy, and we want to be a city that reduces waste, maximises reuse and recycle, a city that has clean streets, public spaces and our foreshore area, a city that uses new technologies to process waste better and reduce environmental impacts. While these priorities, in my view, remain unchanged, it's critical that we review our actions in light of the waste crisis and quickly changing circumstances. So my motion asks officers to immediately review our waste strategy in light of the waste crisis, and some of this work has already taken place, which is fantastic, but it's important for us to make sure that we have a council motion which supports the work of council. The motion also asks officers to come back with options on green waste collection and the provision of food, organic and garden organics, FOGO curbside collection. We've discussed this throughout our council term, and we discussed this during our deliberations around the waste strategy which we adopted, and there were some reasons brought to us as to why we couldn't do this. Some of them were financial costs, and councillors unanimously, I believe, accepted this. But our community has come back to us time and time again since that instance and asked for us to look at this again. And I think that's important. As part of our review, I'm also asking officers to consider and report on other potential resource stream separation and collection options. So the reasons for these steps are that the circumstances have changed from when our policy was adapted, and they're quickly changing, and we need to be adapting as well. We know that when it comes to green waste collection, that each year around 250,000 tonnes worth of food are thrown away, mostly ending in landfill. This is enough to fill Melbourne's Eureka Tower each year. And households in the city of Port Phillip each produce an average of 554 kilograms of waste, which goes to landfill, which is about 14% more than the average Melbourne household, and around 30% of this is food waste. So we really do have an imperative to act, an imperative to look at the information again. The reason we need to look at other options for us to separate our resources, we know that China won't take our recycling anymore, and our state has no adequate industry of its own. New technology is finding new uses for waste. This is almost coming to us on a weekly basis. And the message from many businesses is that recycling is good for the planet and the profits. So we need not only a circular economy concept that we accept, but we need to embrace it as well. So, like I said at the beginning, while this motion recognises some of the work currently underway, I believe it's important for us to be very specific in terms of the work that we want officers to bring back to us. I, in particular, believe that we need to look at the green waste collection and FOGO again, and also look at other potential resource separation sources. And I don't believe that some of that work necessarily is underway in the way that it's been framed in this motion. So I hope that councillors will support this step tonight, because I think it's what our community wants us to do.
Thanks very much, Councillor Simic. Councillor Baxter? Councillor Voss?
I'd like to move an amendment.
Sure.
To number 5, please. And it will read, requests officers to provide a report with recommendations for changes to the Don't Waste It waste management strategy. Including the feasibility and cost of implementing the options described in 3 and 4 above. Seconder?
Pretty much all read. Yeah, it's all read. Seconded by Councillor Copsey. Now,
thank you. Just quickly speak to it. It's really just clarifying what I've found not quite explainable in number 3. And so when it says in number 3, instructs officers to review previous council decisions, there was no sort of recourse back on that. And I think this amendment just makes sure that it does come back to us with costs and explanation on those previous decisions.
Right. Is that acceptable to the mover of the motion? It's an amendment. Yeah. So does anyone else wish to speak to it? Okay, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? That's unanimous. Okay, so we've had the Speaker. The seconder has declined. Does anyone wish to speak to it? Councillor Pearl.
Yeah, I'll speak against it on the basis that the amendment that was just made is the one part that actually asks the council officers to do something other than what we're already doing. It's quite express, and that's a good thing, but generally speaking, I don't think it's a great precedent to come to council and just write some motions on things that the council's already working on, albeit this may provide officers clarity of what council expects of them. A lot of this might be happening behind the scenes, but I don't think it provides a huge amount of prescriptive direction other than what's already going on. So I commend Councillor Simic for bringing it. It's something you're obviously very passionate about. But yeah, I don't wish to derail anything the officers are already doing, but I don't see the value in bringing a motion like this to council when all of this is already happening, other than the amendment to item 5. Thanks, Councillor Simic, for bringing it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Do you wish to close? Oh, Councillor Copsey.
I think it's very important that we're clear with our community and transparent with our community about the work that is going on. A lot has changed in the waste space, and not much for the better in Victoria since we came to office and since we completed our Don't Waste It strategy. Waste was one of the issues that we set out as a council to take a transformative approach to. We know that we're not doing as well as we could be in this space, and I think barely a week goes by without me being contacted by a resident who just can't understand why they don't have a green bin. And so I'm fully supportive of us continuing to work on this issue as a council until we're meeting community expectation. I acknowledge the great work that the officers have put into Don't Waste It, but I think it's very important we publicly acknowledge the changed circumstances and also give some guidance, because there's been some great developments, such as trials on the separation of glass, for example, in the City of Yarra, that we can learn from. We're leaders, but we're also fast followers in Port Phillip when we can see an idea that has merit and could bring benefit to our community. And certainly with some of the stuff that's going on at South Melbourne Market that I was so chuffed to hear about tonight, we've got great know-how already being trialled in our municipality in some of those test sites. So thank you, Councillor Simic, for bringing this motion, which talks about some of the developments that have occurred since Don't Waste It. And I think provides valuable clarity and additional info for officers to work with as we go once more into the breach on waste, and let's see if we can get something that's a bit more suited to the times out of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simic, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor. I know this is it's quite late, and this is coming at the end of what's been a very long day for us, but it is an important motion. Because it does really set a clear direction for us in how what steps council can take to address some of the issues we've faced. And Councillor Copsey talked about how members of our community contacted us and asked questions about why we don't do green waste recycling. But to be honest, I also, even though I've supported council's decision in the past, I'm not sure that the circumstances around some of those things haven't changed, and really want to see the evidence again. So I'm glad that this will be coming now to council as a public report. It'll give people in our community an opportunity to come and speak to it, and give us an opportunity to discuss it again publicly. But also throughout the process have clear steps, and this being the first steps, of what we are signalling to our community, that we are listening to them and that we are taking steps to address the issues they've brought to us.
Move to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried.
Can I request a division, please?
All those in favour? Gross, Voss, Crawford, Baxter, Copsey and Simic. Against? Marcus, Pearl. Okay. 16, reports by councillor delegates. I've got one. I attended by phone a meeting of the Inner Urban Regional MAV group. That's all I want to say on that. I will bore you with it at COT next week. Any others? Urgent business. Councillors, do you have... Urgent business. Councillors, do you have any items of urgent business? I'm sensing a no. Councillors, we have no confidential items tonight. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thanks very much.